Hello, hello, welcome to the next episode of the Fiddler Green podcast. I think I have this wrong. I think maybe is that 57 already? I guess it is. Well, welcome to Fiddler's Green podcast, whatever number it is. Today we are on a podcast titled Corn Sugar Sex Magic. This is indeed April Fool's. And I was kind of surprised about this. Everyone was thinking that this is a joke title. There is a reference that I want to bring up going through this talk that kind of touches on these elements. But do people not know the cultural reference? Am I kind of dating myself here? I thought this was a very obvious callback to the Red Hot Chili Peppers' seminal album Blood Sugar Sex Magic, which was the album. They were a popular band before that in the 80s, but it was the album that really put them on the map. And I thought this was a really, really obvious callback to that, but apparently everyone thought this is like I'd actually be talking about sex magic or something like that. Oh my God, it's so weird. Is this Jeremy just trolling us because it's April Fool's Day? No, it's a 90s alt music reference. It's I guess it has relevance to my talk today. And I'd like to thank everyone here for joining me because, I feel like it's been a while since I've done one of these. I'm trying to get very, very consistent on doing these podcasts every other Tuesday at this time so that I can kind of have a pattern of rolling out a talk and going through the discourse. And of course, it's been very, very, very difficult to do these things. My work's been kind of gearing up a little bit and I've just been exhausted. And additionally, the kind of to add insult to injury, I'm technically off of Twitter during Lent. And I get on Twitter to promote these streams. I'm broadcasting on Twitter because I have a simultaneous broadcasting app, so I can do all the services at once. But when you're off of Twitter, it's like being off of it's like someone who's used to working on Adderall suddenly having to work sober. the the energy you get from the discourse there and how sort of current you are on the various dramas is critical. And I don't think any of the podcasts I do are particularly dependent on current events. I usually like to talk about themes that are more eternal, that go deeper, that try to reach for some higher truth. But the hooks, the thing that get people interested are always the things that are going on Twitter. And Substack doesn't really work the same way. I mean, Substack, its notes function is very quickly becoming a worse version of Twitter. It's becoming a less usable, like a lower IQ version of Twitter, which is kind of deplorable because the whole idea of Substack was that clout is gained from the written word, not from some secondary thing like tweeting or high volume, low content type posts. But I'm searching and searching for content. I give myself permission to like do these little polls and like check in when I answer my DMs, because everyone DMs me to communicate. These days, it's essentially a secondary email for myself on Twitter, even though I'm trying to get off of the main feed. I still don't really have any idea about what's going on, but at the same time, it does kind of give you some perspectives on a lot of different things. And I guess, this is kind of, I guess, where my conversation goes. I have been really, in the last few months, I've been really unfollowing and blocking a lot of people because I've become suddenly aware of a dynamic that's emerged sort of post vibe shift. And it has to do with a lot of things. It has to do with a lot of ways I've been thinking about the world and thinking about what we're doing here on the podcast. What is even the point of listening to podcasts? What are we doing in this kind of weird political period where it seems discourse is completely dead? And I think the main thing I'm thinking about is just kind of how epistemically we process problems, process issues. So as a lot of people know, I'm kind of living between a lot of different worlds right now, moving around a lot, living with my in-laws in Canada for a brief period before I go back to the United States. And it just reminds me of a lot of ways that, the story people tell themselves about how they think and how they process information is fundamentally different than the way that they actually process information and the way they actually follow politics. For instance, I mean, I got into, I moved in with my in-laws. My in-laws are kind of like Fox News conservatives, but Canadian, which is kind of astonishing since all my life I've grown up with and lived in blue areas, sort of like elite college areas. Even when I wasn't in college or in graduate school, I still was in like these urban areas like Portland or Seattle doing jobs, very, very blue areas that have very progressive politics. And even when I was a heretic, that culture was dominant. And I was kind of tuned in to having discussions with people over various issues. And sort of the dynamics that came from that. And what was odd is that it was weird because when I first got to talking to my in-laws, like seriously, like every day at the dinner table, you would expect like more conflict or, because you're talking politics always comes up these days and you talk about various political issues. And of course, I'm no conservative, even though I'm very right wing. And you always expect that when you get to a clash, like it was with my family, more or less, the clash would come down to kind of like a fundamental conflict of values. And then there would be a disagreement and it would come to a head, and maybe you'd have the same disagreement the next day, same disagreement the next day, but there would be kind of some back and forth and processing. of the issue. Like there would be a point where you couldn't push them further than they already were, and that's not how it went at all. With these with this sort of tribe of people. I mean, it's literally the people that Curtis Yarvin called the hobbits in his sort of hobbit versus dark elf dynamic. Uh, the the uh, the interesting thing was that like I would get immediate concessions. Like I would point out something fundamentally wrong with the conservative movement. They would just agree with me, and and I would point out something fundamentally wrong with the Fox News epistemology or their understanding of government, and they would agree with me. And it would be concession after concession after concession, and but they wouldn't actually unravel the point at hand. They just kind of disagree with the thing, disagree with the point on under discussion, and we just kind of move on. And the next day, we would have the exact same conversation, and there would be no update. There would be no grappling with the previous things we had said. We would just have the exact same conversation over again. And I would win it. I would win it because there was essentially no opposition, but there wasn't really any fighting. It was just it was like we were talking about an issue just to kind of talk about, like, to have, like, it was like an entertainment product. We were gabbing over this. We were just kind of spilling verbiage over this issue, and it wasn't like we were trying to argue over a fact or convince the other side. It was just we were just spilling words over this topic. And and I've dealt with this a lot more recently. Is just trying to figure out exactly what's going on when we even are having conversations. What are we even doing trying to solve problems in the modern world? A long time ago, this was when I was in college. There's this instance that kind of, like, I don't know, I don't want to say it scarred me, but it just had me thinking a lot about how people work. And it was when I was in University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and I had all of these friends, and they were all hippies. And I was kind of a hippie myself back then. This is sort of the height of my progressivism, and it was a 2007 or something like that, 2006, 2007. And so I'm out and around, and my friends have bought all. This is just before the financial crisis, but even back then, people don't know the area, right? So you have Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is where the University of Michigan is. It's a very posh city. It's technically a suburb of Detroit, but I mean, you wouldn't know it because it's all filled with rich college professors and cute little homes. And you can kind of see the Michigan of old, because Michigan used to be a cute little bourgeoisie state before it kind of became known for being like the core Rust Belt area, with with problems having to with high racial problems pertaining to places like Flint, Michigan, and of course Detroit proper. And but next to Ann Arbor, there are communities that didn't make it, that were essentially more reliant on the auto industry, that dried up over the course of the 30 years before I attended the school. And one of those places was a place called Ypsilanti. It's pronounced with a Y. I think it's an Indian word, but Ypsilanti, when I got there, it was like hippie central, because you could Ann Arbor was all bougie, and there was tons of townies, and everyone had tons of money from the college, and all the endowments and all the artists lived there. But if you were kind of more alternative and more kind of earthy, like the cool thing was to like get land in Ypsilanti, because Ypsilanti's the housing market was already in a state of decay. This just before the housing crisis of 2007. So like the bottom was falling out of all of these housing prices around there. And people could, very famously, someone sold a house for a nickel in Detroit, and houses were going for insanely low amounts of money. And these were decrepit places. I mean, the foundations would lack repair. You'd have to buy insurance on it, which is unfortunate. So you'd have to get it reassessed. But the property value was like rock bottom. You know, there'd be loose bricks and the rotting wood, and of course, like there's no opportunities anywhere near there. Although it's within range of University of Michigan. So how far away could it even be? It's a pretty good deal. So my one of my friends had bought like I exactly don't know what money. I think they pooled all their money together and they bought like a bunch of land that were they had useless houses that that they think that were like worth nothing and were condemned and you couldn't live in them. And there's one house you could live in, but their idea was like, okay, we're going to take all of this and we're going to turn it into a community farm. And sure enough, they get there, like they plant all their crops, and where we kind of help out on the side, and they come back in a month, and this is in summer in Michigan, and this place is a swamp. If you go back into the old yearbooks in the University of my father also went to University of Michigan, at least for graduate school, and I was like, oh, I wonder if I could find him in one of the yearbooks. And you go back into all of their really old yearbooks in Ann Arbor and the used bookstore, and like you could find students dying of malaria because this was essentially a swamp. And we check back in on my friends running their little community farming project in Ypsilanti. Like, how's it going? And they're like, oh, it's going great, but like we're swarmed with mosquitoes. We're swarmed with mosquitoes, and we need an engineering solution to how to get rid of all of these mosquitoes. And the thing was, this is obviously music to my ears. Like, oh my God, an engineering solution. How can we get rid of the mosquitoes? And obviously, like, the obvious way to get rid of mosquitoes is to get like mosquito killing chemicals, insecticides, right? Like that's how most people do it who are on farms. But of course, like we're hippies back then. Well, I felt like it's the 60s, but like we're kind of trying to do a 60s thing. And I'm in engineering school. I'm thinking, oh my God, we have now this is the chance for us to employ our minds to use green technology to find a humane and organic way to kill a ton of mosquitoes. So we stay up all night trying to plan out like what is our great mosquito, our mosquito destroying idea. And of course, all of the practical ideas immediately get shot down as being either not humane or being not organic or whatever. And so like the best idea we have is that we're going to try to transfer a bunch of bats over to eat all the mosquitoes. And I mean, it's kind of silly, but the big project we undertake, we go over to their little farm the next day, and we decide that we're going to build like a whole host of like really really well made bat boxes. This is our solution. And so we go and we build the bat boxes and we get the wood, the nails. We have all of these instructions about how to build this is really before like when Wikipedia exists, but this is not like this is before the age of YouTube proper. YouTube is a brand new thing. You can't just pop open a YouTube window and go how to build a bat box. So we're like filing through all these books and plans about how to build the optimal bat box. And there's like discussion about how we can transfer bats or where to get bats. How can we get a bat colony to live here? And we spend like all day doing this. And it's sweltering hot heat. None of the houses have air conditioning. There's very little shade. And we're just, we get to the end of the day and we're just completely bent. We're like, okay, we need to kind of take a break from this. We need to go out. We kind of need to find some just take a change of scenery. So we walk with this guy. We get a tour of the farm, these hippie farms that we're building the bat boxes in. And I remember this, like we walk around the house that we've been working in front of for like 8 hours in the sweltering heat, and behind the house there's like a whole like football field of open water containers. The guys had been collecting rainwater outside the house, presumably for drinking organically, and it was all stagnant water. And like it hadn't been collected, it hadn't been filtered, and you could see like this was where the mosquitoes were breeding. We had spent 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours trying to come up with a solution. 8 hours trying to build these damn bat boxes, and we were about to spend another day trying to relocate bats there, let alone finding a place to hang the bat boxes. And the guy was essentially running a mosquito breeding colony, and in his backyard, right across from his plants, and then wondering why all these mosquitoes were coming. And we point this out to them, and they're okay. Oh wow, really? Mosquitoes breed in stagnant water. Okay, great. I'm glad you weren't here in going to University of Michigan in 1890, wondering why your friends were dying of malaria. You would have saved the people who had dug the Panama Canal some casualties if you had discovered that large quantities of fresh stagnant water are subject to breed tons and tons of mosquitoes, which is the problem you're dealing with here. Great moments, but okay, what do we do? Well, after we discover that they're raising a mosquito colony, he's like, well, I'm going to find a way to humanely remove the mosquito larva, and you go back to building the bat boxes. So after we discover the futility of our task, we immediately go back and we continue to build the bat boxes. I think we got about 6 to 10 of them done. Nice wooden things. I don't think they were ever hung. I certainly lost my motivation for this task. I bring this up because it's one of these moments where it kind of the way that we conceptualize problems in the world is we are very much hammers looking for nails. And the hammer, we want to have this kind of discourse. We want to have a certain kind of experience of fixing a problem. We don't actually, and that's exactly, we want to have this. We don't want to have a solution. We want to fix a problem. So, when my in-laws and I are talking about politics, we don't want to actually fix the problem of losing power in Canada, being demographically replaced, or even making sure that the next generation of children don't have their wealth taken away from them. What we want to do is we want to cathartically blame progressives. It's a similar thing with my in-laws and their dogs. They have these these mini schnauzers or whatever they are. I mean, I shouldn't put down my host, but I'm not a small dog person. Insofar as I like dogs, I like larger dogs, like huskies. I think French bulldogs, that's about as small as the dog should get. Like if you're smaller than a French bulldog, maybe pugs, but like if you're smaller than a French bulldog, I really am not going to like that dog. And of course, like one of the biggest problems are the dogs always pee everywhere. But here's the thing is I always wonder, why do people get these dogs? Why do people get these dogs? Anybody, Chihuahuas are the same way. Chihuahuas, Dachshunds are a little bit like this too. They're roughy dogs. So you come into the door and they rah, 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 every single time. We've been here for months, and they keep on attacking me every time I get in the door. Keep on tripping over them. They keep on peeing everywhere, and of course they're completely unable to be potty trained. The whole point of dogs is they're supposed to be smart enough to be potty trained, but we've bred a dog that's too dumb to be potty trained. Like that's that. We had to use technology. We had to use technology to get the dog dumb enough so that it would piss indoors. And, for a while, I kind of sympathized. I was like, okay, I don't like these dogs, but this is just the way things are. And everyone's doing everything in their power to make sure that they're taken care of. I guess the way my in-laws describe it, it's like they describe it as if they've been saddled with these dogs. Like the dogs were left on their doorstep. Like there's not any understanding that they went out and bought these dogs. The dogs are just here, and they have to take care of them now. Uh, and the mystery of the small dog ownership problem kind of was brought to a point, which is every single time we sit down at the dinner table, we have to deal with the dogs begging. And every single time interrupting what usually is a conversation about current events, which usually devolves into a conversation about politics, which usually devolves into into the same conversation about politics I've been having over the last 3 months, the exact same one, Groundhog's Day, over and over again. Interrupting that are my in-laws yelling at the dogs to stop begging. Okay, I guess the dogs are too stupid not to know to shit in the middle of the floor, like right in the doorways where I always step on it. Like they're too dumb to learn that. So I guess they're too dumb to I guess they're too dumb to teach not to beg, but in that case, then why are we not ignoring them? Why every time they beg are we yelling at the top of our lungs, no, go away, bad dog, like every 5 minutes, so that the conversation is constantly interrupted. Like, randomly you're going into a point about how the news cycle is fake, and all of a sudden, no, get down, because someone's begging at the table, right? Or why aren't the dogs put in the other room? Yeah, but then I don't know how I missed this, but 2 months into, and I've even cooked meals. I guess my wife cooks most of the meals, but we take turns between all the family members to cook meals. But I never do dishes, and it takes me like 3 months to realize that after everyone leaves the table, the dogs get fed right from the plates. Like the plates get, like the food gets thrown off of them onto the floor, and the dogs eat it. So I mean, why are you yelling at the dogs for begging? The dogs are being incentivized to beg. You're telling them to be beggars when you gave them all of the food. And this is something. I know this is everyone always knows that this is the case, but this underlines a certain reality. The dogs are there to cause problems. That's why they were bought. They were bought to create problems, because people want problems in their life. Just like I can't imagine for 1,000 years that my friend who owned the farm in Ypsilanti almost 15 years ago, 17 years ago, didn't know that large bodies of stagnant water attract mosquitoes. People invite problems so that they can engage in having fake solutions, and in creating fake solutions and feeling like they've accomplished something. This is true with other relatives. Like their house will be full of like knickknacks that they don't need, and the reason is that like people love going out. They love going out and going to the store and having like a minor problem, like we don't have enough staplers, or we have had a problem in the kitchen with this particular task, and then buying a gadget for that task. That's a very popular problem. Like it's great. It feels cathartic. It feels like you're advancing. And because all of these little gadgets you get from the store are well within your price range, it's this incredibly rewarding feeling, like you're making progress. But you're making progress on a problem that you've created, that you're knowingly feeding into a cycle. You're knowingly epistemically trapping yourself in a mode, and the entire act of working on this, of developing yourself in the capacity for this problem, is to participate in this kind of LARP of problem solving. This back and forth where you play the role of the responsible bourgeoisie homeowner, of the hippie farmer, even solving a problem that you yourself have created. And I'm not saying anything. I guess I'm not saying anything I didn't already know, but being off of Twitter and kind of dipping back into this, I don't think anything real is necessarily happened on Twitter since I've been gone. I mean, certainly a lot of drama has happened, I'm sure. I mean, that's what I was there for. But it does put me in mind of sort of the cycle that we're in. This is unrelated, related back to all of these things. I mean, the cycle we're in, to spoil this, is that politics really should not be an entertainment product. Politics really should not be a mode of catharsis. Politics is about survival. Politics is about taking the things that you find are meaningful and are true and good and making sure that they survive into the future. Everything about your life needs to be bent to those ends, and politics is a critical dimension of that. That's why we're doing this. That's why we're here. I mean, I hope you find me entertaining. I hope the stories that I tell have a certain amount of resonance with all of you, and that you're actually finding this stuff useful. But the problem is that's not the systems that we've created. Don't really take stock of this. The systems that we've created ultimately regress into a certain strange kind of loop. And I think this kind of accelerates that there's sort of a natural life cycle to social media, such that when it comes online, when it first originates, when it first emerges into the online world, then it is a very pure experience. It is very close to real life, such as, here is a problem. Here is a potential. So here is a problem. I'm struggling with it. I'm finding information. I am engaging in dialectics, and I'm going to come up with a solution. And then after I get the solution, the problem is hopefully fixed. And if not, we learn some stuff, and then the dialectic takes another step forward. So that's kind of like ideally how human understandings of issues and conversations and problem solving works. And then it hits the internet as sort of an event horizon. And the internet, I mean, I guess this happens in all media forms. Television shows had this pattern too. Like you get in an early season of the television show, something like Full House or Happy Days or Family Matters. Full House is a great example of this. Well, maybe I don't know what people know. I won't say Fresh Prince since I didn't know how that show progressed, but I'll just take Full House. Other than being, one thing I always say about Full House, it takes place in San Francisco, but the studio house that they shoot it in is so, and it's supposed to be like one of these like boxes by the bay. And every time I saw the show, I'm like, that house is not one of those boxy San Francisco houses. Like, I've been in thousands of them. They don't look like that on the inside. It looks like a modern American suburban house, like in some place like, Wisconsin or Michigan or something like that, where like there's this huge downstairs area and, it's not transparently wood. But anyway, like in the early stages of Full House, there actually were plot developments. There actually was a concept of a show, like a challenging concept of a show, like how when your wife dies, like that's what the show is about. It's about coping with being a widower and having a bunch of kids and having to appeal to help for outside family. Like that's a serious thing. Or to take for instance, here's to take a more nerdy example, like Voyager. Voyager was a Star Trek episode. This was the first bad Star Trek series, in my opinion, but it had the best concept. The concept of Voyager, for those non-Trekkies, is the concept of all Star Treks is like they go out, they try to discover something. Everyone, like the captain is like some Promethean hero. Either he's like Kirk and he's a cowboy, or he's Picard and he's some kind of like old world aristocrat who happens to be in charge of a starship. And the crew just worships him, and they're intrepid and they have integrity, and they're the best example of the American liberal man. And they go out and they find the monsters or the temporal anomalies and they triumph over them. And they come back and everything is restored, and then they go to the next planet. That's the cycle of Star Trek. And it was originated in Gene Roddenberry's original series, and it was perfected in The Next Generation, and it was subverted very well in Deep Space Nine. And then, there comes another subversion, which is Voyager. And in Voyager, the twist is that, the Captain Janeway is essentially trying to destroy a set of Federation traitors called the Magik, which are like basically ultra right wing ex-Federation citizens. Like, they're sick and tired of dealing with the peaceniks at Starfleet. They want to declare war on the Cardassians, who are raiding their colonies anyway because they're in the neutral zone, and they're stealing ships and military supplies, and the Federation wants to be rid of them. But oh no, there's a catastrophe, and Janeway and the Maquis ship get sucked across the galaxy, and now she has to commandeer her own ship, and she has to piece together a crew because half the crews have died in this transfer, and half her crew is Maquis. So half her crew is comprised of impressed officers that she was going to court-martial for being traitors. And now she has to get back across the entire galaxy with a crew that hates her and is ready to mutiny at a drop of a hat. Brilliant concept of the show. Just like, Full House had this very, very serious concept to begin with. By the end of the second season, by the end of the first season, both of these shows have gone into a cycle. They've gone into a pattern. Now the shows are just about like a silly thing that happened, like in Full House. We've completely dropped the themes about loss and death and extended family. And now we're just on to like, the kids do something silly this episode, and they'll do something silly in the next episode, and blah, 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 blah. Or in Voyager, it's just the planet of the day, like this temporal anomaly this day and that temporal anomaly that day, and we have to solve the problem by, bouncing off the rear deflector dish, and it's the standard Star Trek episodes again and again and again and again. And this is what people used to call jumping the shark. That's reference to Happy Days, and this happens to dialectic. People enter the internet to try to answer specific problems, and then they get sucked into sort of a content cycle and have to essentially have the same conversation over and over again. So I'm going, and I think it started when I like ContraPoints released the video. Like this person, they're a millionaire. I can't get over this. They started their channel the exact same year I did. Like all of us in political YouTube, 2016 was like the banner year for political YouTube was 2016. It's when I started my channel. It's when Sargon kind of took off in the distinctly right-wing direction. It's when you had the alt-right versus the liberalist drama, and ContraPoints was at the center of it. And if you came back in 2019 or 2020 and said, who won political YouTube? It would be ContraPoints. Well, fast forward, ContraPoints produces one video every year. They have an entire staff to do this video, and the video is absolutely, it's just absolute trash every single time. And of course, it's the YouTube algorithm promotes the hell out of it. But this ContraPoints video, it's so funny. It's so funny because it was about conspiracy theories, and of course, the thesis of the video. I'll save you 2 hours. I don't know if I watched it. Maybe I put it on in the background when I was doing cleaning. I feel like I had to watch it, but essentially it was all conspiracy theories are anti-Semitism, and all anti-Semitism is a conspiracy theory. And conspiracy theories are when people make theories about power that I don't like, or that the people who fund me don't like, then that is a conspiracy theory. And, okay, fair enough. I've heard this a billion times since 2016. Everyone who has an ideology I don't like is a conspiracy theorist. I mean, I could have gotten that from Faraday's Speaks, and they don't make, $2 million a year for one video or whatever egregious thing ContraPoints makes to have someone else shoot their videos. Like, they basically have to produce one scripted Word document, and the Word document is all copy pasta from stuff that was relevant in 2016. Case in point, that they're talking about Alex Jones and Sandy Hook, and the latest they got up to, the latest this video gets to while it's being produced. The most relevant it gets to is January 6, 2020. And like that's the consequence of conspiracies. The consequence of conspiracies is that people are going to have an insurrection against the legitimate government, uh, and it's being released just at the outset of this huge explosion of kind of left wing violence against Tesla dealerships. It's the entire video is in this time warp. It's incapable of existing in the present moment. It basically is. It's like Full House doing reruns of the same thing over and over and over again. Like the previous one last year was a review of Twilight, and the Twilight review was just like every single feminist college professor's opinion of Twilight in 2007. Like it was just that over again, and you just watch you watch someone like ContraPoints, and you realize that they're stuck in kind of this stasis. That they've created a product for the algorithm that's called ContraPoints. And ContraPoints, the reason why they're promoted in the algorithm and the reason why they are who they are is because ContraPoints is simultaneously loved both by the progressive left and by the mainstream media, which means that in order to make a ContraPoints video, you have to find a topic that does not defend either of those groups, which is increasingly impossible. So ContraPoints continuously has to slip on this costume, or I should say Natalie Wynn has to slip on this costume. Well, first Natalie Wynn has to slip on the costume that is Natalie Wynn. And after they slip on the costume that's Natalie Wynn, they have to slip on the costume that is ContraPoints. And ContraPoints can only exist in the world of 2019. Politics can never change from 2019 because in 2019 and 2020, the mainstream and the left had a unified epistemic vision of the world. And so nothing can change from that. We cannot talk about Palestine. We cannot talk about Israel. We can't talk about the Tesla dealerships burning. We can't talk about any of the challenges that have come up in the last years with internet epistemology or AI or any of the things that have caused us, or the Ukraine war, for instance. Any of these things, our response to COVID, or I should say our aftermath to a response of COVID. ContraPoints is certainly very willing to go on about how bad the anti-maskers are, or when at the height of COVID, hysteria was prime ContraPoints moment, like early 2020, when everyone had a common narrative on COVID. That's you couldn't get a better ContraPoints moment because the left and the mainstream were totally on the same page. You couldn't deviate, and that's the moment that ContraPoints has to swim in, and the cycle has to never go beyond that, never actually breach that containment, because beyond there, the brand falls apart. You can't make ContraPoints videos if ContraPoints comes out and is rabidly anti-Israel. You can't make ContraPoints videos if ContraPoints comes out and tries to counter signal some element of LGBTQ or whatever, or actually comes down on one side of the division between the mainstream and the left. That's not their role. So they want to kind of retreat to their old 2017 shtick of being de-radicalizers, but that doesn't work anymore because the problem isn't a fringe. The problem for the left is no longer that the beliefs of the beliefs of the old alt-right aren't mainstream. But insofar as like the unacceptable nationalist ideas, the unacceptable anti-liberal ideas, those have all bled into the mainstream institutions. As far as liberals are concerned, the poison has already reached the heart. There's no stopping it now. And if, in case you were thinking that this populist stuff was just rednecks, they just lost an election decisively, both in the popular vote and in the electoral college. So the narrative of de-radicalization doesn't play in 2025. You could argue the New York Times can't stop talking about how they're going to retake power, from how they're going to revivify the Democrats. But appealing to like the hysteria of 2019 just doesn't play. So everything in ContraPoints comes up like a period piece. And, that's fair enough. ContraPoints is trapped in a play that they created in 2017 and hasn't been able to get out and can't change because their income source is dependent on it. Or is it? Is it their income source? I mean, that's what I would have assumed. I would have assumed that ContraPoints is trapped in a play of their own creation, financially speaking. But then, I get off of ContraPoints' channel, and then the next thing that gets recommended to me is Adam Conover. Adam ruins everything. For some reason, in the early 2000s, everyone had this love for blonde atheists with goatees that like debunked things and looked smart. And like, this is a very big millennial thing in the early 2000s. I never got it. I think the look comes from Mythbusters. Mythbusters was headed up by Adam and Jamie. I guess Adam was also a really popular name. Adam and Jamie were the two guys at Mythbusters. And they both had this kind of like blonde goatee type look. And this somehow caught on, and then everyone started doing it. And by the time you got to the late 2000s, early 2010s, you had these big personalities, and the two ones I remember are the Adam Ruins Everything, which was, I think he was a split off from this thing called Cracked.com, and then The Amazing Atheist, which is like his own little drama. But Adam Conover, speaking of 2020, so he's like a dyed-in-the-wool progressive. And like all other dyed-in-the-wool progressives, he's doing like sort of the cope thing after 2024's loss. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, I'm kind of interested in this. People learn the most when they've lost. People re-examine their priors. What's going through his head? Is he going to become a communist? Is he going to do something more radical? Is he heading towards the center? And no, he's doubling down exactly where he was at the height of his popularity in 2019. No movement. And not only that, he's finding all of the issues that the Democrat Party is trying to move away from. Most notably people like Gavin Newsom, which like the Democrat Party's take on Patrick Bateman's American Psycho. This guy, and along with a lot of other career Democrats, are trying to slowly reposition themselves as the party of moderate good governance. Which is very, very hard because everyone thinks the Democrats are crazy these days. And so they're toning down the anti-white stuff. They're trying to put the woke away. But, as you might imagine, politics is what you can't walk away from. And a lot of things they can't quite put away. So, case in point Newsom tries to move back on transgenderism for children, our modern insanity, and then transgenders in male sports. This is like the low-hanging fruit of being moderate. Like, just be a sane individual. Think about a problem inside reality, and you're suddenly a moderate person. Adam Conover has a huge problem with it. This is totally unacceptable. How could you possibly abandon transgenders? These are the sacred victim. And of course, he's done episode after episode, and one of them was forwarded to me. And I'm like, okay, wait, what was the last time I remember Adam Conover? I mean, the last time I do remember him was from the cover of Dudley New Right's Millennial Snot, of which Adam Ruins Everything is the ne plus ultra of millennial snot. You could not get a better example of it, especially his face. He's always smirking. And it's always incredibly irritating. And it's been incredibly irritating now for 20 years, and the guy does not stop. The other reason why I remember Adam is from his appearance on Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan, I mean, what can I say about Joe Rogan? Brilliant interviewer, amazing businessman. I understand why people like him, right? I understand why people like him is because he asks like these incredibly basic questions. And then he gives kind of like, he follows up on the questions and chases down a line of curiosity. And it's sort of this level of sincerity that's just totally absent from millennials who are always insecure. They're always kind of mugging for the camera, kind of like the children of Jon Stewart is very much the millennial generation. And of course, Adam Conover comes on, and I never really watched Joe Rogan, but I remember this one. Joe Rogan, Adam comes on Joe Rogan specifically to defend these two issues: transgenderism for children and transgenderism in female sports. And he gets owned, obviously. Like, it's just basic follow-up questions. And you can everyone covered this at the time. If you're new to the internet or you're new to YouTube, you will not remember this clip, but it was one of the more circulated clips. Joe Rogan just asks him, like, well, how are you going to have men compete in women's sports if they've gone through puberty as men? It'll completely destroy women's sports. And then Adam follows up, well, maybe we should just not have gendered sports at all. And Joe Rogan says, well, then we won't have women's sports. Women won't be able to play sports. It's like, I don't know. Maybe men are being defended from women competing with them. And everyone in 2020 laughed at this. In addition to the idea that a 6-year-old or a toddler could consent to irreversible drugs being given to them, or very young gender surgeries, which were also being entertained in that conversation. And, Adam had no defense for this. No defense was ever developed later. And I kind of had assumed that what would have happened was that Adam would have taken this and he would have kind of like pulled a Destiny, come up with like a more moderate version of this. So like, here's the more moderate correction that I could see happening. The more moderate version, maybe not even really necessarily a more moderate version, but like there would be an adjustment of the worldview so that something could plausibly be put forward. So for instance, I encountered this in one of my progressive friends. So, I had this exact same conversation. How can we have transgender women in men's sports? They've got a natural advantage. Counterpoint, we can't define what a man and woman is, so we just shouldn't have women's sports. And then I say, well, then you won't have women playing sports. And then the follow-up to that is exactly what Adam said. Well, how do you know it won't be men who are outcompeted by women? Because women are just as good as men at sports, even football. At which case, I laughed and think that's ridiculous. Have you ever seen sports? What are you talking about? You fast forward a week and, he gets embarrassed. He comes back and the new adjusted opinion, which is what I expected from Adam, is, okay, no, we're not going to have male and female sports, but we're going to do the sports division by weight and by muscle percentage. And there are problems with that too, because men have advantages that don't just come down to weight and percent fat in the body. But at least that's plausible. Like, you could kind of imagine. And there's also the problem where, but by weighing in, you could essentially de-rank yourself from the competition that you wanted to compete in. And so there's a whole other avenue of cheating by that standard. But at least that's epistemically plausible, right? Like, that's epistemically plausible. It's 2025. I get this Adam Conover video in my video feed about transgenderism and about how Gavin Newsom and the moderate Democrats have betrayed them by moderating on these insane issues that they can't even defend when given a huge platform to defend them. And what do they say? They say, well, we need to get rid of men and women's sports. And then the follow-up is, they had this panel of trans people. And the follow-up is, yeah, men have been counting for too long for gender divisions in sports to save them from having to compete against superior women who have to work twice as hard to get where they are. Now, we need to stop men from being defended by the gender sex division inside sports. They need to train harder. They need to do more work, because otherwise the girl bosses will kick their butts. Male weightlifters, they have it easy. They don't need to train at all. When the female weightlifters are going to come in and they're going to destroy them. And you're thinking to yourself, what are you talking about? And I leave a comment. I mean, is this I leave a comment I shouldn't have done this, but I leave a comment in the comment section about this. Is literally this your best idea for gendered sports is to get rid of the sex division in male and female sports and have everyone compete in a general league? I mean, you're just going to get rid of women in sports, but maybe the left and the right can unite on that common front. And then I got like tons of comments all going, yeah, yeah, that's a great idea. And the line comes back again. The line comes back. It's the same line, like, men have been sheltered from competition for too long. It's time to get rid of the sex division in sports so they can feel the heat from their superior girl boss women in their same sports. And your jaw just kind of opens up. The epistemic system is completely closed. It's not. Adam Conover, it's been 5 years and they haven't tried to adjust this worldview at all so that it sounds remotely plausible. And that's because there is this siloing effect. So now not only is the entertainment product put in a loop, like we're now inside of a loop, such that you have to, like counterpoints, perform the same thing over and over again to appease your audience. So now not only are you in a loop, you also have such a rarefied specific audience that even after getting completely destroyed on Joe Rogan in 2020, such that it's a meme how badly you lost it. Not only, I mean, I'm not expecting them to change their positions because, people have core religious commitments, but at least get a better argument, at least get the destiny argument or something like that. Get anything. You're still going on this idea that our deadlifters on the Olympics are going to be displaced by females because the females are girl bosses. That's it. It's the system is supposed to do this. It reminds me of this, maybe I'll get back to this later, but there is this famous the famous thing. I didn't make much of this at the time, but John Carter, and I'll go over his article in more detail later in the talk, but and this is true for everybody. We all live in these closed epistemic systems. We're all trying to escape the hamster wheel, but in many ways, I feel like when we look at the internet as a phenomenon, and as sort of a destructive, corrosive force, what characterizes right wingers is that we never really got full into the internet. No matter what we have, the left wing communities that are our correspondents are much more purified. They're much more online, and they're much more of an echo chamber. So in some sense, when you're looking at a liberal or leftist community, you're actually in some sense looking into the future of what the kind of internet effect has on people's brains. And this is something from Mimetic Sisyphus. Good Lord. Friends, I thought this was mimetic syphilis, but I guess I was wrong. Liberals don't know things. They don't read history. They don't obsess over stats. The few data points they do see, they forget. Their entire worldview is driven by consumption of fiction. And in some sense, it does match. I'm thinking back. Politics for the left is much more a politics of the entertainment product. All leftist politics is built around entertainment product sources. They're all kind of the theater kids demographic. But this is something that kind of infests all of us. And I'm going to skip the slides a little bit here. After kind of the foray into the left, I go back to Substack and I read another piece by Jacob Savage about the complete exclusion of male writers. And so this is a great piece from Compact Magazine. I know not everyone's favorite magazine. It's Sohrab Ahmari's magazine. And this was like a brilliant piece by it's Jacob Savage, I believe. Jacob Savage is the full author's name. It's cut off in the screen cap I have here. And this is something we've known for a long time. We've known about this not only because if you're a white male, you can't get yourself published, and if you're from a minority group, both in college and in writing workshops, you're encouraged to submit. I mean, we've known this forever. People have been proclaiming from the rooftops since 2012, white men should submit their work less, and editors should not read their work if it is submitted. But we didn't. I guess it took sort of a thoroughgoing journalist to actually get the goods on this. Beyond just Joyce Carol Oates tweets and people's lived experiences and our knowledge of the bookstore, what is the actual statistics behind this, the death of the white male writer? Well, if you break it down as Jacob Savage did in this compact magazine, you can see very clearly that in 2013, they basically just stopped publishing white men. Like they have 0% of the rewards. They have zero representation. Not like white men have representation, but the white men who have representation in these systems and these bestseller lists and these new publications and these awards, they're all like boomers and Gen Xers. Like the millennial men have been completely cut out. There's no young white men because they don't get published, because editors don't want to read their stuff. Or I should say the mainstream editors for high literature don't want to read their stuff. And fair enough. And you think, okay, this is good to know. It's finally good to have it definitive proof of this by going to all the numbers of what's published and what's awarded and the various ages of the authors. That's the critical step that reveals it. Because oftentimes when you say like, oh, do you have no white male authors? They'll wheel out one of these boomers like the late Philip Roth and go, oh no, we published Philip Roth. We still publish white men. Look at us. We publish all these people who were born in 1970. This is their cover, and so now we have it in so many words and in proof. The really interesting part of this piece, though, is not that. It's not. I mean, I do appreciate the fact that Jacob Savage took the time to make that put a finer point on that open contention, but the bigger achievement of this was going on and saying, actually, the bigger problem is that it's impossible to write about the current time period and point to the problem of where we are at. So they gave the example, like if you're a white male and you're about to write your everything novel, like as a millennial, talk about your experience in the same way that someone like David Foster Wallace would represent the Gen X experience, or someone like Philip Roth would represent the boomer experience, or something like that, right? All of these authors, like what is your big everything book going to talk about when it talks about what life is like in the 2010s and 2020s? The problem is you can't honestly describe it. You can't honestly describe the world because your perspective as a white male in particular is illegitimate even by your own standard of value. The closest we've ever gotten was something like Fight Club. And even that hasn't really, it crosses the edge into surrealism. It can't even stand on its own feet as a realist work in its own right. And so what we have is kind of this collective elite culture that can't look in the mirror. It's closed. It wants a particular entertainment product, and at all costs, it cannot turn the mirror back in on the collective life of the elite class inside Blue America, because to do that would be in some sense to wound the imagination of the people who actually read books. It wouldn't map into their worldview. The modern imagination is actually constrained, and this is a topic I've been doing a essay series on. I'm trying to finish the last piece of the series called "The Blessings of Babylon," just this kind of epistemic closure. But what you have at the core of this lack of white male authors, or serious white male authors, because you can write, like, you can write a novel about Japan or Malaysia as a white male author, as long as you completely separate your own writing from your own experience, which of course makes your writing less interesting, less vivid, less lived. And but the reason is because the collective consciousness of the people who read books has detached itself from reality, such that to show them reality would be to, in some sense, harm them. It would be, in some sense, to physically harm them, to show them what reality looked like in 2025. That is where the mindset is of our reigning literati. And this kind of brings me to another, like, fascinating thing. And again, I want to say that I'm stealing this from John Carter, who wrote a brilliant piece on this. I'm envious because I wanted to write this, and then he wrote it faster than I could. But I had a very similar experience to this. Now, it's funny, everyone, because it's the internet, everyone has the same set of experiences, and and so you end up coming to kind of revelations at the same time. And so there's this movie, or it's a Netflix movie. Is that, do you call shows on Netflix movies, or do you call them miniseries? I don't know. I feel like every Netflix movie is a miniseries, and every miniseries is an extended movie. But whatever. It's a Netflix special, created in the UK, the United Kingdom, in England, and it's another one of these, like, woke remakes of the week. And people always get angry at these things. There's been a race swap. We had one. I don't play video games, but for some reason, I still heard about the Assassin's Creed with the black samurai, based on kind of like this one instance where there was a black slave in Africa, and it got completely blown out of proportion. Um, but you think, okay, well, this is going to be a similar one to that. So the idea is that the director was inspired by a bunch of knife crimes in British schools, specifically two of them that happened in the last 2 years, where young adolescent boys stabbed girls in these really, really strange acts of cathartic revenge. Um, Surprise, surprise, the two stabbers that were the direct inspiration for this fictional Netflix series were African and Middle Eastern in origin. Their crimes were obviously racially motivated. As a matter of fact, as an attempted defense, I don't know if both of them are using this defense, but they're using trauma from racism as part of their active defense going forward. And of course, what is a Netflix version of this this adolescent stabbing video look like? Well, of course, it's a young white man, and a young white boy, like, and a very young one at that. Like, this small white boy is like this absolute murderer. And why is he a murderer? Oh, well, that's because of right wing influencers like Andrew Tate. This is the incel stabber, like Elliot Rogers. We've been reacting to Elliot Rogers for the last 13 years. Well, let's react to Elliot Rogers again. And now we're going to do a Netflix series about an adolescent murderer who's been influenced by scary right wingers. And great. And then in the meantime, the government under Keir Starmer is saying that they need to, because Britain has such a horrible time with these, crazy knife murderers, they need to legalize ninja swords, because the problem is ninjas. Japanese ninjas, African or Japanese, are rampaging through London along with their incel allies and stabbing everyone, apparently. and we have to fight this ninja menace by taking it out at its source, and the source is ninja swords. It's samurai swords. It's katanas. That is the plague in modern Britain that is destroying its youth. Okay, fine. Welcome to your woke outrage of the month. There'll be another one next month. Why am I talking about this? Sure. Outrage happens, and immediately after the initial anti-woke outrage happens, the people who are trying to be moderate come in. And here, of course, I mean our good friends, the liberals. I don't know about James Lindsay, but I do know about Helen Pluckrose, whose Substack feed I follow and who I get into arguments with on Substack. And she immediately comes in with a big old finger wag. Oh, you anti-wokies, you're being so naughty. Don't you know that this movie, this adolescent movie, it's fiction. It's fiction. It's fiction. It has no relevance to the real world. It's just a story. It's just they just randomly selected the race of the young kid. It's not really inspired by the stabbings that occurred in various schools by distinctly non-white kids. It's not inspired by the huge upsurge in violence that's happened in England and other countries in Europe. It's just a story. It's just a story. It's fictional. It's like Lord of the Rings. You're just projecting your objections onto it. Okay, yeah, maybe. I mean, we know it's not, because we know that the director, while he wasn't trying to portray this, was inspired by these other crimes. But then you go on and you go to that other end. You go to the Adam Conover area of Substack, and this is the joke on almost right wingers, is that we like to think that Substack is a pretty right-wing friendly place in the way that it lets us get our ideas out, in the way that it allows us to kind of talk about non-politically correct ideas. A lot of right-wingers have made good on Substack. But whatever you've done, the progressive blogs are way bigger, and they rake in way more money, especially since a lot of progressive bloggers have been fleeing dying mainstream publications and coming over to Substack. Their paying audiences very much in tow. And so what's their take on it? And this is what really made the adolescent scandal, is they think this is a documentary. So one woman in particular does this incredible leap where she says this was inspired by real events, but whereas the real events were more complicated and potentially inspired by racism and racist bullying, which needs to be addressed, this rightfully focuses us on the real problem, which is misogyny. And then the criticism comes in and says, this is almost perfect. This is almost a perfect call to action on the question of misogyny. The only problem is that it portrayed it as if there were both sides. It portrayed the adolescence movie, portrayed the stabbing as if it was a response to female bullying. And we know that there's never an excuse for violence against women. It's always just the fault of raw hatred. And then you have Keir Starmer cite this movie as a documentary, as John Carter points out, kind of as a Freudian slip. What you're saying here is reality laundering. So you have the reality of stabbings, largely disproportionately committed by non-white adolescents. You've got two incidences of really racially motivated stabbings of black boys onto white girls, and there's a lot of evidence that it's racial in dynamics. It's excused by bullying. It goes into the idea laundering system of the group mind. It comes out literally whitewashed, and then all of a sudden now the real object that we're reacting to is not the incident in reality. It is the symbol inside the collective imagination, inside the fictional movie. Now people are passing laws and are creating education policy based on a movie who's totally inverted the dynamic and at the same time filters out any kind of understanding of what's actually going on, to create an entertainment product. And what's so funny is that if you read these articles, that you can see them go from the real incident, where they think bullying is a possibly exonerating explanation for the original stabbing in reality, then to the fictional whitewashed version of the stabbing, and then immediately when it becomes the fictional whitewashed version of the stabbing, bullying becomes an unacceptable explanation that would create any kind of ability to understand or sympathize with the perpetrator beyond pure hatred. Um, it's seriously looped. It's a collective. It's a collective cul-de-sac. They're completely stuck inside their own imaginations. Um, I kind of puzzled over this, and it's so funny because you see Helen Pluckrose see this too, and her reaction to this. You can see in real time progressives retconning reality in front of your very eyes, and your answer is, you guys are overreacting. This is just a show. This is just a show where the ruling class of Britain talks themselves up into treating their own native boys as a potential terrorist threat based on real crimes that were committed against that demographic. Uh, yeah, I don't think this is just a show, Mrs. Pluckrose. What are you saying? And it seems to be that liberals, they're really going all in on this propaganda does not work line. They're really going in on this whole propaganda. Just, it doesn't work. It's all just a show. Everyone knows this isn't reality. Everyone knows that this is fake. Do we? Do we know that? I'm not so sure that we do. I mean, I'm actually asking a question here. I mean, and I think, do my in-laws know? I mean, maybe it's clear to me at this stage that a lot of the conservatives literally do think of themselves as just entertainers. They just think that they're playing a role. That they're not real conservatives. They just play them on television. And then they go on Fox News, they play the conservative, they do the kayfabe, and they take their make off from the Greg Gutfeld show or whatever, and then they come back down, and their audience, like, God love them, my in-laws, they watch this show, they get super angry at the progressives, and then they pretend like they're actually going to do something about this, which of course they're not. Yeah, I mean, I mean, the problem is that this is actually real. There are actual real politics. I don't think, Adam, I think this might be something where conservatives might be, is it better or is it worse? I'm not so sure. I think conservatives understand that this is fake, and they appreciate that it's fake, and they consume it like somebody who's consuming professional wrestling. Professional people who enjoy professional wrestling know that it's fake, but the idea is like, just let me believe that this is true, and that's good enough for them. And if you come in and spoil it, you're really not being a very good sport. Uh, Progressives believe this political theater like they're in the Truman Show, like they've designed their lives around this. Adam Conover genuinely believes that sex divisions in sports are there to protect men from girl boss competition that would otherwise make them illegitimate or uncompetitive in Olympic contests of strength. He legitimately believes that. And so does his audience legitimately believe this. The women who are writing these articles for mainstream Substack legitimately believe that Adolescence is a documentary about an overpouring of incel terrorism targeted at women for the crime of being women and organized by right-wing influencers. They think that this is a documentary on this stuff. I don't know. I guess I think I've already covered this, but I mean, in the last 2 weeks since I've done one of these shows, the conservative media has kind of exposed itself. I don't really know what to say about this anymore. The two things that have happened is Ashley Sinclair has literally transformed herself into Jerry Springer 2.0. This is a person that was supposedly supposed to be like the next big thing in conservatism. And now all of a sudden, all the things she's doing is creating these big public relations fiascos so that she can try to extort more money off of Elon. And it's become the Murray Show 24/7. Hold on. And I guess was anyone ever really that into Ashley Sinclair? To kind of complement this, the next thing you have going on is this amazing thing where or like a huge number of the conservative influencers online start all defending soda consumption, specifically the promotion of soda to children. And this is a how should I put this? I mean, Aaron McIntyre and Jay Burden did a whole show on Sodagate. But the idea is that there is a there was coming down in the Trump administration, probably brought on by Robert Kennedy, an auditing of the product of government money being used to produce and promote soda consumption inside, various branches of our soft money apparatus. A perfect thing to downsize. And of course, when this gets targeted, immediately a bunch of conservative influencers go, "It's our constitutional right to have soda being promoted on the public dime. Herder, what are you doing? This is America. Don't you know we need to have soda drinks that are 2 gallons large and like give you diabetes if you have 2 of them? What? This is America. What? I'm sorry, officer. I thought this is America." It is America, and the reason why you're so upset is because you're literally getting paid by these soda companies, except opposed to actually just promoting it in an ad spot, you're literally just changing your opinions so that they are completely incoherent for the greater purpose of promoting corn sugar water to your audience. You're giving people something that you know is bad, so that you get paid some minuscule amount, and you're presenting this as your legitimate opinions. I think that conservatives just like being lied to. This is something that we're going on to this. We are currently the most entertaining group to watch is the progressives, specifically the New York Times. I've always found the New York Times podcast to be insufferable, but for the last 3 months, it's been amazing to watch. It's been very entertaining. It's been very enlightening to see people actually struggle with an issue. Trump and Doge are cutting back critical areas of the federal government. Is it going to be enough? I don't think so. Is it nearly as much as we need? Probably not. And the deportation efforts aren't going fast enough for our purposes either. But it's interesting to see the reaction. And the line is, Can you believe that you cut program X, Y, and Z, says the distraught and pretentious progressive like Jon Stewart? Can you believe it? Can you believe all of these great programs you're cutting from the CIA slush fund to go directly into the pockets of Politico? And the conservative response, this is literally what I voted for. I'm not convinced about that. I think that this is the reality check that is going to hit the conservative movement in about 3 months, certainly no less than 6 months, or certainly no more than 6 months. Your audience, your constituency didn't vote because they realized that there was this thing called the deep state that was a threat to their children's future and that was funneling money to their enemies. They voted for Trump because they didn't like progressives, and he made them feel good, and he said that we can continue the consumption. He is there to make sure that the corn sugar sex wagon keeps on going. Your consumer product will keep on being scheduled again and again. The sugar water must flow. The soda must be there. This is FanDuel Americans. They're only there so that they can watch their sports, place their bets, and listen to people complain about complaining. They weren't disturbed by the fact that pretty much half of the conservative establishment showed that they had no principles, no understanding of what constitutional rights meant, and no care for the overall health of America, and were completely grifting, not disclosing their alternative funding sources when they were feeding you what ostensibly was their legitimate opinion on soda. That's part of the entertainment product. As a matter of fact, they don't want woke to go away because complaining about wokeness is what funnels this entire entertainment product. They don't want wokeness to go away. What would happen? For instance, what would happen if wokeness went away? Just imagine this. What if we destroyed the deep state? Wokeness is no longer a thing. Not only is wokeness not a thing, liberalism is not a thing. It's just torpedoed. The reset happens, based world appears, and now we're stuck, maybe not in base land, but in slop land. Modernity still exists. We still have the meaning crisis, except now we don't have a scapegoat. Now the question is, how do we reestablish spirituality? How do we rebuild community? How do we rediscover folk culture? How do we reconnect with our fellow man? How can we make things more meaningful in a world that's saturated by media and useless jobs? And how do we undertake the task in ourselves to live our lives? That's not what people want to talk about. People want to look at the person with blue hair in conservative America and point and laugh and feel that if we got rid of them, that all the problems would go away. It's the FanDuel conservatism. And the problem is that the country needs a conception of itself that is not entirely negative, and that isn't an entertainment product. The wokeness plays a critical role in the conservatives' entertainment product that slop does not. And that, therefore, as we move from sort of woke culture to slop culture, increasingly, the identity crisis between conservatives, the division between traditionalists and people who are Faustian and Promethean, the nationalist right, and FanDuel Americans and sugar water Americans and my identity is my consumption product Americans. The division between those two things will become increasingly clear and increasingly unsalient because the entertainment product no longer holds. Seemingly another interesting article that's somewhat connected to this, and I'll link this back here. The Wall Street Journal, and this is something that Scott Greer has pointed out for a very long time, and I covered this in my most recent Substack essay. like, let's take a simple issue here. The simplest issue, the most critical. My friend Kevin Dolan just finished last week. They just had the natal conference, the pronatal conference. I think both Lomez and Peachy Keenan were both there. They published their talks online, and appears to be a really big success. It is kind of silly because pronatalism is it's almost kind of by definition ridiculous, because antinatalists are it's an illegitimate position. To debate whether you should live or not is a ridiculous debate to be having to begin with. But on the other hand, I had Kevin Dolan on the channel to talk about this. Pronatalism is very good from the perspective of just getting everyone into the room and says, who meets our minimal standard for ally? Like, how broad can we create the definition of friend before it becomes meaningless? If you're an antinatalist, you're automatically my enemy. And that's true for almost all humanity. If you're an antinatalist, you are an enemy of the human race. And I don't know. I can't, other than God, I can't imagine a situation where I would be opposed to my own species, which is essentially what antinatalism is in its pure, or even in its watered down form, as you experience it on Reddit. So, core to this concern, which we all agree is a problem, is how do we get people to have a sustainable level of births so that we do not have our society collapse financially, economically, demographically. And this begins and ends with this idea of the relationship collapse, brought on by many, many things, not the least of which is social media. And the classic example, the example that everyone goes to is, this is the conservative. Let's go back to the conservative world. First of all, the left does not like talking about the collapse in relationships. They kind of do. I hate to admit this, but after the ContraPoints video, I kind of binged a whole bunch of left-wing channels just to see what they were talking about. And sure enough, one of the things they're talking about is this crisis, right? Not the natal crisis, but the one that immediately precedes it, the collapse in relationship dynamics. And what the left, again, does not like talking about declining birth rates because it thinks that's a good thing. It does not, and it certainly does not like framing this in a way that it indicts women. But their favorite thing to talk about are how unappealing conservative and non-feminist men are. So if you go over to these progressive channels, they'll frame the crisis in dating and mating to be, women don't want to date men because men aren't feminist enough. It's a quality of man crisis. It's the quality of man crisis, and the quality of man is that the quality that is missing is they're not feminist enough. Okay, that is insane. Everybody who's ever met a woman who's not, a feminist herself, and most feminists don't want to get married and have kids, realistically. But anyone who's met any woman who's at all close to the median woman knows that women do not particularly like male feminists, especially male feminists that ape the kind of Steven Universe soft guy motifs they're very popular. And like, if you think of like Steve Shives, Thought Slime looking guys that are very effusive and very effeminate. Maybe they're non-binary. Women don't tend to go for that, especially women who are looking for families. So, but this is the story that, fuck reality. Why do we need reality? We can just take examples from our fiction, like Steven Universe, and then react to the fictional representations and treat that like reality. Okay, great. So yeah, the quality of man crisis is what's driving the collapse in the mating and dating game that is ultimately causing the collapse in birth rates. Interesting theory. If your brain is fed on fiction from the progressive universe. Ironically enough, if you go from progressive land to Fox News conservative land, it's a variation of the same story. The reason why there's a collapse in dating and mating is because of cue the cliche, the quality of man crisis. I guess I'll say this about conservatives: at least their understanding of this problem is based on a kernel of truth in the present system, and a situation that was true in previous decades of this country. There was kind of like a quality of man crisis, a quality of men who wanted to get married crisis in all throughout the late 20th century and for the first several decades of the 21st century. And there is a kernel of truth insofar as a lot of the men that women do see as marriage prospects are stringing them along. They're having a lot of casual relationships because of how women choose their mates. They don't need to ever settle down, and so all the women get into situationships with men who don't want to marry them, and for that reason, there is a quality of man crisis going on. But all of this is to miss the real problem behind all of this. And that is, I don't like harping on this because this feeds into a self-victimization cycle that is very, very, very destructive on the right wing. Young men convincing themselves that, oh, there's no use in trying, and that's the worst thing you could possibly ever think. But if I'm examining this as a married man, as like a systems analyst, the thing that has really, really, really changed in the last 20 years since the mating market collapsed is not the quality of men, it's the perception of women towards men. The perception of women towards men has radically changed with the advent of social media, such that women's desires for men massively exceed what they possibly could expect to marry, and massively exceed what would be reasonable to expect, even if they were hypergamous. I mean, like, you think, okay, a woman, she makes $70,000 a year or $90,000 a year as a low-level data entryist. She wants a guy who makes more than her at like $110,000 a year. Like, that's reasonable. No, but she's shooting for a man who makes double the amount of money she does. And the woman who makes $100,000 or $100 or $200,000 is shooting for a guy that makes $400,000, and so on and so forth. And the Wall Street Journal interviews these women, and their expectations are absolutely unreal. They're completely unhinged from even in a best case. I mean, the quality of men has degraded. And that's kind of the ironic thing, is that there's a kernel of truth in these women's complaints, but it could be there could be no degradation in the quality of men whatsoever. These women could never get married, and in the process of interacting with social media and the thought bubble, they have completely psyoped themselves into essentially never getting married. And so there's this phenomenon that Scott Greer, the Substacker, calls WGTOW, women going their own way. This is the real phenomenon of the 21st century that is driving the collapse in mating and dating markets. Now, if you're a young guy out there and you're a traditionalist or conservative and you are you're above average, this probably does not affect you. Like, if you're in the 60th percentile of men, WGTOW does not mean you can't get a wife. You totally can. WGTOW is really going to hit people who are like in the 30th percentile categories. And that's a damn lot of men, but those guys are going to get seriously hit and hit hard. But if you are a reasonably professional guy, this is just a matter of playing the numbers. But if you're a systems person like me, I can't, I really, really want this problem to be a both men and women are both wrong sort of thing. But the thing that's really changed, the thing that is totally unsustainable, is this expectation on the part of women for mates. And let's go back to the previous one, because I'm not quite done with this. The problem was, and this is something that is interesting in the context of natal con, there is no dialectic way out of this problem. I'm gonna say this again. There's no dialectic way to fix the woman problem. Not least of which, I mean, first of all, at a more basic level, you cannot. It is only a very very small number of people, and it takes a lot of concentration. Can have like an intuitive feeling and like psyop themselves out of it. You can do this in religion. In fact, religion encourages you to do this. This is something you should do as a spiritual person. If you do exercise, you have to psyop yourself into doing it consistently. Like I'm trying to get a push-up routine and kettlebell thing going, and I have a bad back, and I have to psyop myself into doing it at allotted times. Like this is the thing. Like psyoping yourself into feeling a certain way when you don't feel that way is something that individuals can do with a lot of effort. It does not work on large populations. This is a constant mistake we make in modernity. We see individuals doing something, and then we assume that large groups of people can do something. And, okay, that doesn't work. Now what people are thinking, what a lot of people have thought in relation to the women going their own way problem is, well, what if we raised consciousness of this problem among men and women, and we were able to create a change in the consciousness among both right-wing, conservative, independent, and reactionary women. Like basically everyone but feminists. Everyone but feminists is aware that hypergamy is a problem, and we're going to we're going to try to redesign our social system so that we can re-incentivize the dating market to work. Like that's hypothetically an idea that could work. The problem is that this doesn't work. You can sit down with individual women and show them the components of the problem, but this in a social media environment will never stick. It will never stick. Women, collectively speaking, not individually speaking, cannot hold this. Let me rephrase this. A social media network of women cannot hold collectively as a shared perception, a shared truth of the world, that women are responsible for a major social problem that needs to be fixed by constraining women's space of decisions. Collectively, no network of women can collectively hold that belief. This is an anthropological impossibility. Individual women can, social media networks or collectives cannot. And it's the same way, that you see in sort of the trans spaces, like that have convinced themselves that sex divisions in sports are there to protect men from women's competition. Uh, Certain collective networks develop beliefs that work for the network, and then the belief never gets challenged by reality or by outside discourse, and it becomes solidified. And it takes a lot of effort to disrupt this belief, just like it takes a lot of effort. I guess it's a little bit different with conservatives. Conservatives are kind of the odd person out. Conservatives seem like all of their beliefs are modifiable, but they'll just sort of cycle back in on them. They'll forget you had the conversation, then return with the same belief. At least that's kind of how the boomers deal with it, which is a different way of maintaining these collective illusions. In order to get the problem solved in the way that we understand it now, there would have to be a collective appreciation of this fact that, that female behavior has caused a major societal problem, and that some constraint in female choice is needed to fix this problem. But this cannot be collectively perceived inside a female network. This is one of the things that I've learned about. I think this is true of humans generally, that there is this quality of groupthink, where groupthink principles, and this is true of everything. Like I said before, everyone's going to have perceptions like this. I understood as a Christian. So when I was an atheist and I became a Christian, I was very concerned about the resurrection of Christ. And I did research and I convinced myself that it likely happened. And then I decided at one point I would dedicate myself to this belief. But I'm fully aware that Christians cannot have like a rational conversation over whether the resurrection of Christ happened. It is a sacred belief of the group, and as such, it is very, very difficult to grapple with from the outside. Um, so everyone has these things. Christians have them. Right wingers have them. I just mentioned a belief that was totally unquestionable 5 minutes ago. A totally unquestionable belief of mine that exists in all political spaces I will be a part of is the human race should exist and we should produce new humans to replace the old ones. AKA, moral pronatalism is an unshakable, unquestionable belief in any political community that I'm a part of, and I have no desire to admit people who want to be voluntary human extinctionists. Like, I am epistemically closed on that fact. Completely epistemically closed on that fact. And every human group, male or female, is going to have certain elements where they're totally epistemically closed on. There is no such thing, as a completely epistemically open community that can pursue thought. Thought requires axiomatic propositions. Those axioms have to be closed. So, that being said, there are certain communities that essentially become Ouroboroses of a type. They circle back in on themselves. They become completely closed, and the more closed the idea is, the more they fasten to it to complete the cycle, to recirculate it back in on their own perceptions. And unfortunately, female groups are particularly bad at this. And it really is collectives of women. Case in point, the female group chat brain or any collective network. For instance, at some point in the past, I had I was in 2000s or 2007. I guess this is around the time I was in Michigan. And feminism was having a big comeback because Hillary was running for the first time, and of course, feminism had to have a comeback. And they're all this thing about smashing the patriarchy. And in 2007, George Bush is still president, and I'm still voting for Barack Obama. I'm not as progressive as I was in 2004, but I'm certainly not a conservative, and I certainly think that there's a point here. But I still find feminism, like all men that have testicular fortitude, I find like the constant, and with hippies, right? These are they're not the same guys who did the mosquito farm in Ypsilanti, but they're close to it. So there's like all the women are feminists. They're all dyeing their hair strange colors. This is where the dyed hair thing really started up in earnest in 2007. I don't remember many people who had dyed like neon color hair before 2007, 2008. This is really where I remember it taking off. I find it's like really like, oh man, like they're totally right about this patriarchy being a terrible thing. But it's so irritating constantly hearing them go on about it. I can't wait until we finally solve this patriarchy problem. And then, then like they'll see that the problem is solved, and they'll see that like more women go to college than men, and they'll stop doing the whole feminism thing. And sure enough, this is the first around 2007 is the first time I heard about how there just weren't enough female authors of color. There just weren't enough of them. And that's why we have to dye our hair and we have to fight the man. And it will be like we're in an anime movie where we fight, like we're punk girl, we're tank girl, and we're fighting the man. This is Fooly Cooley. This is like the 90s. We're going to take down the patriarchy and we're going to make it so that women can go to college and, women of color get published in the New York Times book reviews and get the rewards. Cool. This is totally like an objective political thing, right? This is for equality. My thought, eventually they'll get tired of feminism. They'll reach their objectives and then they'll look for something else. Like they'll exit the loop when reality catches up with them. But it doesn't. It's almost 20 years. It's been 20 a little less than 20 years, but no, really, you could even go back to 2005 and see this stuff kicking up. It's been 20 years of this colored hair smash the patriarchy stuff. And these women are still fighting the patriarchy. They're still dyeing their hair colors. I'm going down the street and half the women have neon colored unnatural hair. And they all think that they're rebelling. Well, it's because they're rebelling inside a group chat. They're rebelling inside a social media system where the reality is constructed around fiction. It's constructed around symbols that don't actually, it's constructed around symbols that only point to other symbols. So you're not getting angry at some actual patriarch in real life. You're getting angry at a fictional symbol of a patriarch that is a symbol of another fictional patriarch in the 90s that points to an actual patriarch that was in like 1950. Like it's a symbol of a symbol of a symbol of a symbol of a symbol. And you've organized your real life around that. You smash the patriarchy. You've got the jobs. Women vastly outnumber men in college. They make more money. And now you've completely banished white males from publishing, like hard excluded them to the point where their manuscripts aren't being entertained. And okay, is there an adjustment? No. And it's fine. Like, I know that obviously, I guess I kind of realized that there would always be this subset of feminist women who would think that they were oppressed and constantly wanted to circle back on the oppression of their cohort, of their sex. So I always knew that there would be like a subset of like Valerie Solanas feminists. And I guess I assumed that maybe there would be some more moderate versions that always kind of, they would acknowledge that equality had been achieved, but they'd kind of like hold a candle for the glory days when they were fighting the man. What I didn't realize was that even like conservatives and right-wing women who had seen the numbers on this stuff would in their group chats circle back in on the women are being victimized by a men thing. And that is because inside a female group chat, being a victim means you are by definition more important and need to be listened to. And being victimized by men means that you're even more worthy of being listened to. So inside a female social network, even one that's conservative, what kind of bubbles to the top constantly are the victim narratives. In the same way that if you're boiling a beef stock, the fat comes bubbling up and you skim it off the top. Inside any group chat of women, the victim narratives float to the surface, the self-affirmation floats to the surface, and the facts kind of just go down and are forgotten. The contact with the solution or even the real problems get sublimated. Because there's no, sure, they'll be acknowledged if this is a conservative group or a right-wing group. They will acknowledge all of the facts that we point out, but they won't be relevant. They'll be boring. Female hypergamy, they'll hear once and then it will immediately be boring. But Elliot Rodgers is going to be exciting for the next 100 years. Women will never, ever, ever get tired of the Elliot Rodgers story. They will create fictional versions of Elliot Rodgers again and again and again and again and again because he is the perfect villain for a female group chat. He's an unattractive, low mate value person who kills women and makes all women simultaneously victims of the least desirable men. He is perfectly fit for the group chat brain. Lauren Southern. People hated her. I never liked Lauren Southern. I always felt that she was a con artist. I mean, she wasn't involved in Sodagate, but she's just the kind of Ashley Sinclair version that would use her fame as a social media influencer to try to extort people for money by like having big baby drama fights with her rich ex-husband or whatever on Twitter. I mean, she didn't get an opportunity to do that. And the thing is that women never really liked Lauren Southern, but for a hot for a hot 5 months in 2024, every group chat, and I hear this from various women, my wife included, every female group chat was talking about Lauren Southern, being victimized by her ex-husband. There are elements of that relationship. We are obviously hearing a one-sided story, but that story, woman becomes right-wing, a darling of all the right-wingers, and then that status as a non-feminist allows men to victimize her. It's so delicious. It's too good to fact check. It's too good to ask questions about these rumors of affairs with Destiny. It's too good to ask questions about why Lauren Southern married this guy after knowing him for a month. It's too good to ask questions about why he was literally working for the Australian Federal Security Services, who had Lauren Southern as a person of interest that they thought was an enemy of the state. All of these strange little factual anomalies that make the narrative of women being victimized, those are facts, but they're always at the back of the group mind because they're not interesting. They don't carry social status. They have no entertainment value. They don't give you a little hit of sugar. What gives you entertainment value is that story of her husband being a bastard and the fact that her break from feminine consensus allowed her to be victimized. This is not a problem with women. It's a problem with the social network comprised entirely of women, because the social network incentivizes certain sentiments, and it doesn't have to necessarily be online. For instance, I have the picture here behind me. There was this, there was a celebration. There was sort of a celebration parallax moment that struck the right wing in 2024, and it was concerning these girls in an office building. And they were like doing this kind of like playground chant where they sort of validate themselves with like self-affirming epitaphs and put it in like a sing-song voice. Like you might see some 12-year-old girls do at a sleepover party, or like even younger girls do on the playground. Like girls always do this. But the thing is, like they're in an office building, and they're obviously employed at that office building. And they released this video on TikTok where they're like buttering each other up about how they're all girl bosses in this kind of like playground chant, dancing around in trench coats and making up rhymes about themselves being, girl bosses with bobs and all this stuff. And every right winger, every man online, like lost their shit. Like they got so angry about it. And immediately, immediately the question was why. And again, superficially speaking, it's hard to explain because I had a hard time explaining, like, okay, these women are being goofy. It's kind of at work, but why is that? Why are all men getting angry about this? Why am even I getting angry at this? Like I can feel myself not liking what I am seeing. And I can't even really explain why, other than it's a stupid TikTok video. And of course, like all the typical female bloggers are like, men are overreacting. This is an example of misogyny. What is an example of men reacting to is female groupthink. The female groupthink is by its very nature self-validating. And the fact that these women were in apparent positions of power gave people the impression that these women they'd go into a group, they'd validate each other's decisions, and then like the workday would start again, and these women would have all of these crazy ideas that they all validated themselves from believing. And they'll go take these ideas and like use them to justify firing you, or maybe if you're in a publishing environment, not entertaining your manuscript you submitted. to the New York Times review of books, or any number of things like that. I mean, any amount of power can be justified. Any abuse of power can be justified if you get a circle of people who are there just to validate you. Men will accept the authority of queens, but no self-respecting man will be ruled by a validating consensus of female groupthink. And that's because it's a cycle. It's a closed cycle that chooses its own symbols and then builds its worldview not on the symbol's validity against reality, but with the symbol's usefulness at supporting a validation narrative for themselves. If you're a queen and you're deciding on whether to go to war or not, thought experiment if you're a woman listening to this channel. You enter into the war room. The enemy is suing for peace, but the peace could cost you strategically. You're Queen Anne. You have your generals around you. You can see the scars on their faces. They show you a picture of the map with the soldier formations lined out, in the Kriegspiel style, with the enemy lines there. You have the crown on your head, the scepter in your hand, and you have a variety of advisors telling you should accept peace, and a variety of advisors telling you that you need to go to war. And you have to, in that moment, say, yes, we should have peace, or yes, we should go to war, knowing that if you say we will go to war, men will charge into the guns, screaming, "God save the queen," as their last words before they're gunned down. I trust women to make that decision. I trust the queen to make that decision. That is a decision that I don't know if any person can make, and I'm not convinced that that situation would be made worse by a woman than by a man. If instead that room is not occupied by one queen who owns the decision, surrounded by men who are telling her the facts and keeping her focused on the critical trade-off, if instead that decision-making process is a group of women, and worse than that, a group of women selected to validate the queen and make her feel good about her decisions, that is the decision I don't trust at all. And she'll get everybody killed because she'll convince herself, or her group will convince her, that the enemy is bad and bad guys are bad and we need to defend ourselves from the enemies. And, eek, 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 yucky, yucky, yucky. Let's charge ahead, full steam. We need to be validated. We're girl bosses. And then the decision will be made and it won't even be clear who made the decision. Group networks have certain limitations. I think it's easy to see in the context of group chats, specifically group chats that are female, but this applies to all social media networks. It applies to Twitter, it applies to Substack, it applies to Facebook. I've covered the Soda Wars, the Adolescence movie, the female group chat problem, the epistemic closure of progressivism, and the seeming epistemic circularity of conservatives who treat their contact with reality like it's a repeating, self-validating television show. The thing is, we're being hacked. That we have to be aware of it. We have to start a conversation here. We are being hacked by a kind of limbic magic, the titular corn sugar sex magic, although I really should say corn sugar online sex magic. Take your pick, whatever floats your boat. Our brain is being fed dopamine, and the dopamine is overpowering our ability to see reality. It's not as easy as just logging off. It's not as easy as just getting off the internet. And the real risk is that, as John Carter pointed out, and this is a brilliant article. social media has gone, it's now been around for about 20 years. And it's become purified, especially in leftist and female spaces, although everyone's going in that direction. And as it gets more purified, what we discover is that it doesn't need reality anymore. It doesn't need to have an actual example of a statistic or a fact that it processes or an incident of reality that it's trying to pursue. It just needs a symbol that people react to, and then it can construct its own little circular narrative about itself. Now, another thing I'm really jealous that John Carter brought up as an example in this article, uh, which is, I think it's like the involution of the liberal mind is the article name on Substack if you wanted to search it, or you could just search postcards from Barstoom and find it as well. But the involution is a reference to this phenomenon in machine learning that's been well known, but it's become increasingly relevant in the age of the large language model (LLMs). The 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 involution problem is that if you have a machine learning system, no matter how good it is, if you do like the human centipede operation on it, is what you do is you take the output, its conclusions, and you feed its conclusions back into its input, and you just iterate that endlessly. Eventually, the computer will just start hallucinating. It cannot grasp what is real and what is false, and it will start matching critical elements of its own reality to its previous hallucinations, and it will just start going completely nuts. It will go off the wall. The quality will completely degrade, and its thought will become like static. This is the process of all social media networks in 2025. They are all becoming huge destructive static for itself. And this is, I'm going to kind of sneak back here. I kind of had this out of line. This is something that I thought a little bit about when we encountered another phenomenon here, uh, Ghiblification. So we had this AI advancement, and the AI advancement is that you can put photos into the AI, and it puts a Ghibli filter over it, and it will transform the photo or any picture really into a Studio Ghibli version of itself. Now, like all AI developments that I've seen this year, I could have sworn that this already was something that we could do. Cartoon filters have been around for about 10 years now, and I guess this is a really good one. So, but I always, if I didn't already think this was invented, we already knew this was coming. And so, okay, great. Now you can turn everything into Studio Ghibli pictures, including this very famous meme of the wandering gaze of the boyfriend and the jealous girlfriend. This is a classic meme from the late 2000s. I love it. And now it's it looks like it was animated by Miyazaki. Um, this created distress for people because, very predictably, people think that Miyazaki is sacred. And it's not hard to see why. I mean, Miyazaki films are themselves kind of things that are created with a certain sense of sacredness. They display things, they display moments that are holy moments inside the animation. And if you've ever been a fan of Miyazaki's work or any of the other animators at Studio Ghibli, you'll have many of these experiences with like very poignant, very numinous scenes that have just captured your imagination, and you breathe it in and you feel like the best qualities of being human have been captured in this very, very simple, very, very replicable animation style. And it's just pure and wholesome and good. And now everything can be in this style. And now the symbol is ruined. If the symbol means wholesome and true and numinous and poignant and meaningful, and now all our means are Ghibli, we have officially jammed this signal. This signal that meant sacred now means the profane. If people start making Ghiblified porn, then no one's going to associate this style of animation. And as I said, the Ghiblified porn becomes popular enough, and then no one's going to associate this style of animation with wholesomeness and meaning. because we've just taken our sacred sense and we've combined it back into the profane. And now the universal language we had in the West, at least for millennials, to communicate that this moment is sacred, now becomes this went through a filter. The language has become meaningless because it's been optimized for. And this is the problem with all social media networks. This is why social media, we have learned, has fundamentally become degenerative. Not like it's become degenerative because it's been mismanaged because Mark Zuckerberg's an idiot, or because Elon Musk is an idiot, or I love Substack currently. But anyone who loves Substack currently knows that we've already tried Substack, and that attempt was called Medium. And then what happened to Medium? Well, Medium got overwhelmed by counterfeits. And then all of a sudden, having a Medium article didn't mean the same thing as it once did. Because eventually people catch on to status games and they start optimizing for it. Human organic communities are ways that we exchange understandings of status, meaning, value, and wishes for the future and truth. It's an exchange for that. If you make it online, though, all of a sudden you have the ability to start printing up counterfeit notes and entering them into the social media economy. And if you do that, though, the economy gets flooded with counterfeits and it immediately starts printing garbage. And furthermore, because it's social media, and because the algorithm constantly rewards a predefined thing, what happens? People take the output that people like, and they do what you're not supposed to do with an LLM. They take that output and they feed it into the input. And then all of a sudden it becomes the Ouroboros, eating its own input, and the value slowly drains away. All human systems have this failure mode. And in manipulable human systems, where you can destroy the value truth exchange, as in counterfeiting, or as in, cycling, as in feeding the output into the input, that degradation will become accelerated. And for communities that, are are leftist or female, although I repeat myself, the security systems that guard against inflation, counterfeiting, or output to input end runarounds without reference to reality are loosened, and they immediately become validation circles. They immediately become ways of destroying the exchange that's naturally going on inside the system. There is this one thing that I think is central to understanding this problem, and that is Goodhart's law. Okay, what is Goodhart's law? Well, Goodhart's law is this phenomenon that appeared in the British colony. I don't know if this is a true story, but it is always used to introduce this concept of economics. And the concept of economics says that once a social rule becomes an incentivized target, it ceases to become measurable. Case in point, the British Raj in some Indian province, I don't know which one, had a problem with king cobras. They were wandering around, getting into all places they shouldn't, biting people, and it obviously killing them because they're poisonous. Deadly, deadly, deadly. And the British Raj said, okay, look, we need to get rid of these cobras, so we'll do this. We'll give you some amount of money for every cobra head you bring us. And then, so people will hunt the cobras, they'll give us their heads, and then, they'll kill all the cobras. Well, it worked for the first year. They implemented it. People killed the cobras and got the money, and there were less cobras. But the second year, the native cobra population didn't go down, even though the number of cobra heads they brought in doubled. And the year after that, it doubled again, and it doubled again and again. And at the same time, the cobra population, the cobra attacks didn't go down. And what the Raj discovered, or the British agents of the Raj discovered, was that people were just farming cobras. They had giant cobra farms. They were breeding them by the thousands, cutting off the heads so they could collect the bounties. And then they said, oh, damn it. Well, I guess that's a bad law. Let's repeal the cobra heads for money law. And they repealed it. And guess what all the cobra farms did? They released their cobras into the wild, and the cobra population overnight increased by orders of magnitude. Complete backfire. Once you incentivize, once you say, oh, this is a good idea, we need more of this, and you put incentives behind it, immediately the system becomes worse. SEO optimization. SEO optimization defeats the point of search engines. If you can, as a marketer, create a page such that the better you do SEO optimization, the better it appears on search results, you have provided value to the company that is trying to get their product in front of multiple people's eyeballs. But by optimizing your product through search engine optimization, you have made that search engine less good. The whole idea of a search engine is that it's supposed to get what is more valuable for the end user. And the same thing is true for legal systems. Being like lawyers, like high quality lawyers, defeat the point of the legal system. The whole point of the legal system is to be equal. It's to be an equal judgment regardless of what people can pay. But if the legal system is amenable to lawyers for hire, no doubt, then all of a sudden it becomes a pay-for-play system. The lawyers create laws. The laws need to have lawyers, which means ultimately, after enough iterations of this cycle, the law that was originally equal for all becomes a play-for-play system. All social media is inherently self-destructive. It's inherently self-destructive for the same reason that search engine optimizations are self-destructive. I should say all human communities that have the ability to optimize or be optimized are self-destructive. Because in the process of optimizing them, you will destroy the organic rules that makes the exchange of value and truth actually meaningful and useful for the people in it. And after that, people will no longer find the network very valuable for purpose, except for pure things like validation and horniness and very, very baseline things like the limerence or being hungry and grabbing the thing closest to you. Like your lowest level functioning can be satisfied by images on the screen coming at you. But the deep connection to a symbolic meaning and a deep understanding of truth will be degraded because the incentive structure will eventually incentivize things that are not true or that are replicable or that are optimizable. And then when the incentives are for replicability and optimization, then people will print off Studio Ghibli until it no longer means what Studio Ghibli meant. People will optimize their political opinions so that they can be self-flattering to your desire to feel catharsis. They will optimize their political opinions so that they can sell you corn sugar sodas. They will optimize their ability to send you self-affirming messages, especially if you're a female. Women love self-affirmation. They desire it at a fundamental level. And if you're a social media engine, how do you control women? Social disapprobation. That's how women control their behaviors, is you can't do this behavior because if you do, it is socially unacceptable. But no social media system will ever be used by a woman if they feel that there is a chance that they could be the victim of social disapprobation, real social disapprobation on that system. So as a consequence, all social media systems will remove the possibility for shaming or otherwise communicating disapproval of female behavior because the customers don't want that, which means all the social systems that emerge on social media will eventually become useless. They will eventually become self-validation machines, which eventually means that they will become untruth-telling, And they will eventually also bleed meaning and create essentially no value, like Facebook. And then essentially you have the death of the internet. You have AI bots creating porn and selling it back to people who are only consuming the lowest level of product, or other AI bots that are also mapped to those consumers. All social media that is optimized is inherently self-destructive. There can be no solutions. And for this reason, and I think I brought this problem to Kevin Dolan, for this reason, there can be no technocratic solution to the fertility crisis. I'll say this again, not that there is no technocratic solution to the fertility crisis, not that there currently is not a technocratic solution to the fertility crisis. Not we haven't thought of a technocratic solution to the fertility crisis yet. There definitionally and logically cannot be a technocratic solution to the fertility crisis because of Goodhart's law. Parenthood is about sacrifice. You naturally sacrifice more than what you put in. That is an inescapable reality of being a parent. It is an inescapable reality about being human. It's not a matter of repo tech. It's not a matter of finding the right time frame in a person's desire to make money. It's not even a problem of getting men to have the money and buy women houses, although that would certainly help. The problem is that at some point you have to sell people your own individual wealth and happiness is not the main point of your life. That has to at some point be something that society embraces and internalizes to its own logic. And technocratic systems, by their definition, cannot tell that to people. That since you're not optimizing for human happiness or user happiness, it will not create that system. Artificial wombs won't work either. I see the chat. Artificial wombs won't work because when you make a human, it's not just a matter of, I mean, there's other problems with being an artificial womb that I won't go into, but you're also taking on the governance of a human being that has a will of its own. And you have to live with a person that has a will of its own. And human beings are fallen creatures, children as well as adults. Most of the pain that comes with having a children comes when they're kids, quite frankly. Most of the anxiety comes from that too. There's no way to use tech to get around that without deleting what it means to be human at a fundamental level and turning it into a video game. But at that point, you're not raising a human, you're raising a simulacrum of a human. The Ouroboros brain is the end consequence of our age of social media. We've created systems that feed back what we ask them to produce back to us in a self-validating way. And now we're shocked that we can't use these validation systems to get the social results that came from organic systems. And at the end of the day, the only way to do this is to submit to a higher power. This is something that I've done a lot of work in trying to get people to move into the real world and to kind of conceptualize what they want for the future and to work together on that. There's no way we are going to be able to solve this issue through social media. By the definition of what social media is. Right now, Twitter is dying. Right now, Substack is dying. Facebook's already dead. TikTok's already dead. And pretty soon we'll probably move back from Twitter to YouTube, and then YouTube will die. And then we'll move from YouTube to, I don't know, Rumble, and Rumble will die. And it'll be a never-ending cycle. It will be a never-ending cycle until we decide that we want to submit to a higher power. And that is because we have to have contact with the outside world. We have to have someone smack us in the face and tell us that we're wrong. It can be other people that have the authority to tell us we're wrong, that we can't just block. It can be God, if you're a part of a religious tradition that actually has a consistent moral code and isn't just you superimposing your own desires on a higher power. It can be nature itself. Go out and take a hike. Then nature does not care about your own desire for self-affirmation. But at some point, if we do not want to descend into complete Ouroboros brain and infinite counterfeits of value with no ultimate value, we need to submit ourselves to a higher power, to an ultimate divinity, hopefully, but also to rulers that exist outside of ourselves in our real life. It's not our job as consumer. I mean, if you're listening to me, I like to think that I am a sober individual here. Like this is an entertainment product. You're probably listening to me to be entertained, but it's not my job. And this is something that's been something that I said from the beginning. Like, this is a passion project for me. This is something that I've been doing for almost 10 years because I believe it. And I do make a little bit of money, but not as much money as I could, because it's not my job to join the insanity and to chase the incentives. It's my job to kind of sober everyone up and try to get us to touch grass again, to get us to interface with reality so we don't get sucked back in to the degenerate egregore. And this is, I guess this gets back to why I'm reconsidering everything. I'm actually blocking and unfollowing people in mass these days. I used to follow everybody because I'm like, okay, we're in discourse. We're in discourse. I want all the more ideas, the better. I want more ideas. So the more ideas, the better. And I'll just follow everyone, including people I hate. I don't know. I have a limited amount of attention. And the biggest thing that we decide is who we follow. We have to look towards good prophets and away from bad ones. And so, a lot of things that irritate me, you know, obviously, the first thing you should unfollow people who are like, never follow people who are your enemies. We have to distinguish people from good from bad messengers. So, initially, I said, okay, I'm going to block everyone who is anti-human, like an antinatalist, or who obviously is trying to harm my group I'm a member of. But that's only really the tip of the iceberg. The people who are directly your enemies. Really, bad messengers on social media are anybody who's trying to take the time you've dedicated here and turn it from something that could give you information and enhance your life, and turn it into something that just kind of feeds the algorithm and kind of closes the loop down on you into a mode of self-validation. And look, like I watch all sorts of shows that are kind of like repetitive. Like, and I shouldn't name any names, but I don't only watch stuff that's informative. I do like cathartically watch a variety of YouTube shows that are political and that are only kind of cathartic, and they never really come to any conclusions. They're just fun to have as background noise or what have you. Um, but I draw the line. I'd like to think that when I'm watching those things, I understand that I'm separating that cathartic feeling from actually saying, okay, this is a messenger that I should listen to as a personality. When we actually, when they used to say this about the cloud, the cloud is just someone else's computer, right? They said that about the cloud. Well, social media is just a bunch of social networks. The cloud is just someone else's computer. Social media networks are just social human networks, kind of cities that exist online in which you will never directly know the person that's talking to you. But the thing is the same. At the end, the decisions you make on social media are just to be in contact with a variety of humans, a variety of messengers, a variety of teachers. I see that that should say the bad messenger, but the text is cut off because of how the slide is sitting on the screen. I'll have to remember that for next time. So your decision right now is essentially give your attention and support to a bunch of people. And so what I'm really looking for, what I'm really looking to avoid, I should say, is people who have no ownership. Uh, and it's fine if you're a blogger that's like, I am just talking about my own personal lived experience. That's fine. That's fine. You don't have to own any political platform. You don't have to own an idea if you don't want to. You don't have to do anything that you think is like not what you're online to do. But if you are participating inside a political conversation where there are lots of, you know, critical things that hurt people, I'm not expecting any particular conclusion, but I'm expecting you to own the fact that you're participating in this dialectic and that you're aware that your decisions are yours and you're making them and there are going to be consequences. I don't want to hear I don't want you to opine on the Ukraine war and then hear about only about how Vladimir Putin has personally victimized you. I don't want to hear, I don't want you to engage in the gender war and then hear about how men and women have victimized you and that how either men or women need to do better. I want us to talk about what are the problems in this system and bad actors or not, how do we fix them? I'm also increasingly allergic to this idea of not this idea, but this phenomena of insincerity or over irony. This is a really bad habit of millennials, and they do this thing where older millennials do this, and they make everything a joke. They make everything like they have this wall of irony. This is part of the whole Dudley New Right millennial snot thing that is, that he was very good at underlining last year. But every single thing is like, I don't know. Am I joking? Am I not joking? Who knows? Like, this is just all a big joke. And maybe this is an opinion, but maybe this is just like a gonzo piece of journalism. I like Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal as much as the next guy. I think, jokey articles have their place, but when you go like 6 months, if you go 6 months to 8 months, and I have no idea whether these political opinions are authentic political opinions or just jokes, then I have no use for your role in a political conversation because the insincerity allows you to just kind of game the algorithm. Like you can just have sensationalist opinions after sensationalist opinions after sensationalist opinions. It's not hard to come out with an opinion that will get everyone talking about you. It is much harder to have a worldview that fits together and makes sense and sounds honest and reflects reality. Conversely, I am totally allergic to the younger millennial phenomenon of wanting to join the winning side. As soon as I get the sense that some thinker is in the business to join like the good side or the winning side or the elite side, like I don't care if you think you're part of the elite side of an argument. I care if you're actually like smart. I care if you are actually a useful and resourceful person. Agentic, as some people put it. I care about that, but I don't care about you being part of a group that's on the winning side. I don't care if you're if you're a leftist, if you think you're on the right side of history, or if you're a right winger and think you have 100% pure Bavarian phenotype. I care deeply about which theological understanding of Christianity is the correct one, but I don't give a shit about whether you think your church is the most based. Like, I care if you're devout. I care if your theological idea is the correct one. I don't want your collective to be the goodest one. Like, that's useless. And then lastly, and these are kind of the same things, I want to see people kind of trying to break through the barrier, like actually touch. I mean, I'm in the middle of my biggest schizo post for the year where I'm completely up to my knees in theory. But you should really be trying to break the barrier of the online and bring in things from your own life and try to gel. Like, okay, I have this political priority. What does this mean in my own personal life? I have this understanding of what's wrong with modernity. Well, where is it fixed? Where does it feel good? Where does it feel bad? How am I taking these understandings and moving them closer to a mode of existence that is better? And how am I making my macrocosmic political priorities and actions match what's on the microcosmic level? Not because the microcosmic is better or that the personal is better than the political, although it might be, but because I know that in the microcosm, I actually touch reality. This is a ridiculous thing. I got into this conversation with like my longtime online friend of me, Matt McManus, and we got into a conversation about Tolstoy. And Tolstoy is very famously somebody in his book War and Peace who is trying to take on the great man of theory idea. And and uh, and what's funny about this is there was a commentary on he wrote a commentary about right wingers and how they believed that I think it was a Dostoevsky, Zoisma, and there's a skepticism in Dostoevsky towards activism and big political ideas, and McManus's idea was like, well, Tolstoy shows that like activism is a really important part of things, and probably Elder Zoisma from Brothers Karamazov, he might look down on the activists, but they're doing more good than he does. And Tolstoy understood this, and it's like a complete misunderstanding of Tolstoy. I mean, Tolstoy and Dostoevsky have very different views of the world, but one way in which they meet at a point is Tolstoy believes that great men aren't ever really great because nobody knows the ultimate consequences of their actions. And Dostoevsky believes that we are kind of caught in spiritual pride as we reach out and try to become modernist supermen to mold the world. We're discarding the fundamental human reality at our feet. But the intersection of both of these worldviews kind of tells us like the personal and the microcosmic moments of our lives are more important, not because they necessarily create more macrocosmic good or because they don't. And it's not as Matt McManus would imagine it, like generals bad, activists good, which is like the stupidest interpretation of Tolstoy I could imagine. The point is that that the microcosmic and personal is real, but we never really know that the macrocosmic effect of our actions is real. We hope that they're real. We pray that it's real. In some sense, we're called to participate in things like war and politics, which are the same thing, because that's what our role is as Christian men. But the reason why we always return to the local is not because the local is superior to the global, but because the local can be verified as real. It has the taste of reality to it. It hits you in the face, like touching grass, like getting involved in a real conflict. Whereas anytime you participate in things that are large, how do you know you're not getting sucked into these kind of self-terminating, self-validating egregores where you're being fed pride and then convinced that you're the hero of history? We want to look for in leaders and in the people around us. We want to look for people who love things. I wanted to know before I interact with anybody as a political thinker, what is it that they ultimately love? Not like abstractions, like the moments that really fascinate them in a spiritual way, and that they dedicated their lives to pursue. Conversely, how are they owning that? How are they making that love part of their politics and making themselves responsible for its successes and failures? How are they being loyal to the people around them? Again, what you always want to look for in good actors is a level of constancy. It's so easy to be a con artist if you change your song every single day. It is much more difficult to find a position that you stand on and stand on consistently. And finally, you want to see people contact reality, both in the present by trying to puncture the veil locally, but also like sincerely trying to grasp for a vision of the future that embodies what they love. I think if you do these things, um, you have a chance to kind of to be better, to get a better circle of people around you, which is, the only thing that social media is a circle of people around you on someone else's computer. Just like the only thing the cloud is other people's computers. The only thing that AI is other people's computers. It only there what we put into it. And if we're leaders like I am, we need to be humble and accept responsibility and have a certain level of presence. This is I'm stuck on this like article that I can't seem to finish about literacy, but I really just want to write about my own life, like in a more immediate sense. I'm just in the mood to write something that's more personal. I don't know, but this has got to be this age after 2024 has to be the anti-social media social media age. We have to start seeking relationships that touch the actual reference and not just the symbols that are locked inside our own systems. And break the spell. Break the spell of the evil magic that has hijacked your brain. Anyway, guys, that's the end of the stream. And I will go on to super chats. I think just now. Why not? We'll go on to the main super chats. There's an entropy link in the description. Please send a link along, a message if you want me to answer it. We'll try to wrap this up in an hour. I've been going along on the lectures. I've been going for 2.5 hours. That's a good length. 2 hours is what I should really shoot for lectures. But thank you for joining me for the lecture portion, and we'll go on to the super chat. Okay. You get tired doing this. Wow. Batman Bad for $3 USA. Was there anything that Nietzsche got wrong? Well, I mean, God isn't actually dead. He's just dead in the modern scientific concept of the world. Man cannot kill the force of truth behind the universe. And he, there's a lot. Okay, so I mean, there's the simple fact that like God is symbolically dead in modernity. He is not literally dead as a lived spiritual reality in modernity. And when modernity passes, uh, the strong gods, the strong God will return. And the other big thing that Nietzsche got wrong was his interpretation of history. And this is something that like I think Spengler gets much more accurately, is that Nietzsche sees the decline in the Roman Empire and attributes that to things that emerged from Christianity. There is just no evidence of this. The link here is very, very, very tenuous. It's not. It comes from this perception that was brought on by Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. This idea that the Roman Empire fell because of slave morality, and slave morality was brought about by Christianity. It doesn't take into account the fact that if you went back to the time when Christianity was ascendant, it was in ways more worldly than its Gnostic alternatives. The pagan alternatives, when Christianity was ascendant, again, not comparing Christianity of 500 AD to paganism of 500 BC, but Christianity of 500 AD to paganism of 500 AD. In many ways, Christianity is the more body positive, world positive religion than its Gnostic alternatives. This is something that Spengler understands that it seems like Nietzsche does not understand. And that is this sort of unworldliness that you see in the era when Christianity is ascendant is a product of the cycle of civilization, less so the actual substance of the religion itself. Such that when you get to the High Middle Ages, when Christianity is in its full force, much more widely accepted and much more developed, and much more um and much more Christian in some ways than the Christianity of the sixth century. In the High Middle Ages, you think of the art of the High Middle Ages, think of the tapestries, think of their attitude towards battle and valor and the Arthurian legends. What you see in there is a more bodily and more masculine and more energetic religion than even the pagan elements that they replaced. So like this transition between bodily, worldly virtues and esoteric, world denying things is not some product of slave morality. It's a product of civilization's cycle of asabayas. And that is a major problem in Nietzsche's understanding of Christianity as a social force. Yes, say for $20 USA. A month ago, you said the 2000s bluegrass revival had nothing to say. This seems very Gen X. Did Bill Monroe have anything to say when he invented the genre? To me, he was an authentic man of Appalachia, was taught a strange Italian instrument and liked playing fast, but his message was just a love of his people. Well, um, I guess in Bill Monroe's time, the there was a genuine zeitgeist, and this is what makes I do really love 2000s era Newgrass. I really do love it. It's I keep on returning to it. It is a musical passion of mine, just like early 90s alternative music is, or late 80s new wave music. I just love this, like the chamber grass music. But it has a problem in that it's fundamentally disconnected from the moment it exists in. In Bill Monroe's period, which was the late 30s to the early 40s, and then on into the 50s, that's really when he did his work in the Grand Ole Opry. America was in the mode where it was genuinely trying to rediscover its folk roots and revivify them. So these emotions that you say Bill Monroe had, and I think you're correct that he had these emotions. These emotions were like continuous, like from the author to the person listening to it. They were all participating in this collective experience of the music itself. And so that was very good. I don't see that in the 2000s. In the 2000s, the music is in some sense better than the music of the 50s when it comes to style and heartfeltness. But the problem is, this is what I call the Prairie Home Companion problem. Prairie Home Companion, like 2000s era bluegrass, has a very big problem, and that is that the NPR listening blue staters who produce this music and produce the product don't particularly like the people that they're describing with this product. They don't like rural people. They hate their politics. They don't respect their religion, and they want an excuse to hate them. And Newgrass, I don't think that, and I don't think of any musicians that really. I think Garrison Keillor, you know, he kind of expressed some of this contempt a little bit towards the later end of his career. Although I can't think of any quotes. All NPR went in that direction. And I don't think I've ever heard Chris Thiele, who was a bluegrasser who was his direct replacement at Prairie Home Companion. I don't think I've ever heard him say anything that was condescending in this regard, but you could feel it. You could feel it behind the scenes, this disconnect between the creative class and the folk sentiments of the rural America that they were trying to be a part of. And that disconnect did not exist in Bill Monroe's time. But that's why I say that it had a harder time saying something. Batman Bad for $3 said, I've worked as an animator on and off for a couple years. The animation industry isn't doing so well. Advice, please. I've never worked in the animation industry. Batman Bad. My advice is to try to make an independent project and then sell that to a community that really loves it. That would be what I would do. Why not try some independent animation and then try to introduce it into an art scene in a distant space? There's a question of how to secure money, But I don't know the funding sources for that. Right now, everyone's struggling for money on the right wing. And it's not immediately apparent how anyone gets money. But if I were trying to make a big splash, there is a lot of hunger for authentic, organic animation that comes from a perspective that is not the mainstream and that can plant its flag on a perspective that is not mainstream progressivism or Daily Wire style conservatism. There's just a hunger for that. Hunter counts for $5. Anything smaller than a Shiba Inu is not a dog, but rather a puntable pet. Yeah, I'm going to runt punt those things. I've been tempted to runt punt those dogs across the house since I've gotten here, but I shouldn't say that. But I'm not a big fan of small dogs. Anyway, thank you very much. Batman Bad for $3 again says, any advice to nationalists in Canada and Europe? Well, this is something that, this has to be, I was thinking of talking about this in this talk, but I couldn't incorporate it into the subject I wanted to talk about circular self-terminating egregores. And that is this whole conflict that has emerged between the European right and the Canadian right. And I have heard, I just heard Aaron McIntyre talk about this, and I haven't disagreed with Aaron so much in a very, very long time. And he was on with Aristocratic Utensil, and I don't know if they share this opinion or not. But, Trump has been making all of these aggressive moves towards Europe and Canada. And of course, Canadian and European nationalists have gotten pissed. And I think you hear Carl Benjamin saying like they missed an opportunity here to create allies. And Aaron McIntyre said, well, what do they expect? This is nationalism. Trump represents America first. It's not his job to foster an organic European right wing. Man, do I disagree with that. You would never hear this sentiment coming from a left-winger. I understand nationalism. I understand America first. I understand securing our borders. But this is not the 19th century. This is not the 19th century. These global systems are global. And you are not going to be able to make any progress until you can propose a replacement for progressivism. And progressivism adopts its European equivalents. There's no separation between European progressivism and American progressivism. They are all the same people. They all think the same way. They all share the same ideas. They all work and operate together, and that makes them strong. That makes them strong. And you know what makes American conservatism weak? Anti-Europeanness. And anti-Americanism makes Canadian and European right-wingers way weaker. We have to have a common vision certainly for Europe and the United Kingdom, but a common vision preferably for the entire world, because we are trying to replace progressivism, not as just a reigning government system, but as a reigning political language. All of our language about power is expressed in terms that are created by the progressive world. We need to create new ones. And if you cannot create a vision of the future of humanity that has a place for Europe or European right-wingers, then your imagination is too small to take on the American empire. This just kills me. It kills me. I maybe I should talk to Aaron McIntyre about this, because this is a huge disagreement. Trump's job is to create a vision of a right-wing world that will replace the left-wing world. On all levels. On all levels. This is the new world order, and it is right-wing. And this is how Europeans and Americans can be peaceful right-wingers together. Not like, we're going to do America first and you guys are on your own. I mean, I like the idea of kind of teaching birds how to fly by tossing them out of the nest And European governments absolutely need to sink or swing when it comes to developing their own security forces. But this tossing people out of the nest, it needs to be done with your ideological allies on board with a common vision for the human race. That's the only way this whole thing works. And there can be subsidiarity in that. Absolutely. God knows that subsidiarity was part of the original progressivism. That one of their main projects for the first 20 years of their ascendancy after the victory in World War II was to dismantle the colonies of the consolidated European entities and to make them independent, aka not dependent on the European power structures, but dependent on the political order of the United States. And there could be a similar independence of the European states from the American State Department in the new revolution, if indeed that is what we're experiencing with Trump. But you got to give them something. You can't just be like, oh, screw you guys. That's not going to work. Don't you want right wingers to be powerful? If right wingers cannot work across national borders and progressives can, then you are not going to win in a globalized world. This is just a technology you have to take on board. Nerve AMV Maker says, I just got around to reading The Third Policeman, which you mentioned on a stream a while back. That book was crazy. I'm starting to think everyone around me is part bicycle now. Oh, I love that book. I love surrealism. I'm thinking of reading that book or suggesting that a family book group read Flann O'Brien because it's just absolutely great. I mean, another very similar one from a Russian author is The Master and Margarita, which I absolutely love too, not the least because it's a reference to Faust. I hope you enjoyed Flann O'Brien. He's a great author. I just adore early 20th century Irish authors. You can't get any better than that. I mean, I don't know. I was never a fan of Finnegan's Wake or even Ulysses, but Portrait of an Artist was good. Not that I finished Finnegan's Wake, but yeah, I tried. I really tried. Darth Kilhoun for $3 says, damn, I was on a run when you started the stream. I'm a half hour late going to rewind and rewatch. Always look forward to your streams, Dave. Keep it up. Well, thank you very much, Darth Kilhoun. I am trying to get these things more consistent, and I've decided that the day is going to be Tuesday. So every other Tuesday night is hopefully the Fiddler's Green podcast night. I'm going to keep that night. Maybe it'll have to switch to Wednesday. It couldn't be Wednesday initially because my wife had choir practice then, but now no more. So hopefully we'll be able to keep it consistently on Tuesday. Nerve AMV Maker for $3 says, your mosquito story could be used as a script for It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia episode. Yeah, I might already use that story once in a video way back when called Islam is Not the Problem. So I've used that story several times, but it's just such a perfect example of idiocy, like just system-wide idiocy. And then like to keep on going with the bat box construction after you know that the farm is a mosquito farm. It's just idiot make work. Nerve AMV Maker continues, your point on people creating problems reminded me of Edgar Allan's Poe's Imp of the Perverse. In it, Poe traces a deep impulse in people to create problems for themselves and eventually destroy their own lives. Said it was there at the fall. Yeah, I mean, I'm convinced that people create their own problems so that they can solve them and feel good about solving smaller problems. I don't want to put this on women, but women definitely do it a lot. I'm sorry. I feel like every recent stream I've kind of taken a shot at the fairer sex, and they are certainly wonderful, but they've got some big blind spots, and those blind spots come up on group chats. Heku for $5 USA. I've been listening to a bit of Yarvin lately. I'm just a bit late on this, but is it even worth to listen to the New York Times interview? Just seems like they brought him on to ask him loaded questions to soothe the Redditors. The system is defending itself. The New York Times interview tells you more about how the New York Times is thinking than it does about Yarvin. I've been listening to the New York Times, and they're really, I mean, talk about people who are addressing a problem. The New York Times editors are talking about, they understand that they have a real problem. They're not talking about politics just to talk about politics. They're talking about politics to create a real problem with their narrative about American politics. They know they have to fix it. And so you're seeing some fascinating examples of real human thought in the last 4 months from the New York Times. They're actually struggling with things. Sure, their questions are incredibly loaded. They brought Yarvin on just to discredit him, obviously. The classic example from the New York, they say something like, I think your historical examples really obscure more than they enlighten. So it's like the facts that you cite, they distract us from our narratives. So we really need to disregard them and focus on this loaded question that I've queued up for you. And don't quote any primary sources like the McManus thing. Like I don't want to talk about primary sources. I want to talk about what the expert opinion is. I want to talk about how many sources you have, not what the primary sources say. I want you to talk about who's the real racist. Like that was Matt McManus and Ben Burgess' interaction with Yarvin. It was embarrassing. And that's that's what the New York Times did for a little bit. But the fact that he was on there and answering questions in a somewhat honest capacity, you could see them like thinking, how can we take these ideas and sanitize them for our own religious community such that we could update ourselves and make ourselves stronger? And I wish people on the right wing were thinking like this. There has to be an international vision for right wingers. There just has to be. I speak as a family where half the people are dual citizens. We spend our time going from Canada to America, back to Canada all the time, and there just can't be this reality where Canadian right wingers are like at war with American right wingers. This is so so stupid. It hurts me every time I think about it. It's absolutely insane. There has got to be an international right wing consciousness. There has to be an international Christian consciousness. There has to be a right wing worker consciousness, although that's materialist. But a right wing a right wing traditionalist consciousness, a right wing ethnic consciousness. Although by definition that will have to be many as one. Uh, Nerve AMV Maker for $10 USA. I am reading 19th century history, and I'm stuck on how intertwined democracy, nationalism, and romanticism are. These ideas are so connected that they make no sense when separated. I don't believe a modern, cynical cosmopolitan believes democracy is sacred. I do believe a romantic French nationalist did. Yeah, and it's kind of odd because I'm reading Thomas Carlyle again, and he is his Sartor Resartus has elements of romanticism in it. And it's like sort of like Jane Austen in that way. Like Jane Austen is like, I mean, Jane Austen is an anti-romantic, right? Like so technically she's like not romantic, right? Like she's responding against like the romantic notion and trying to make it more realist, but she also borrows some elements from it. And the same thing is true for like Goethe and Carlyle. Like technically they're realists. Technically they're the portal to realism, but they've brought some romantic elements in on the side. And like Victor Hugo's a little bit the same way. And and romanticism has serious problems with it. And but its spirit, its feelings are in the right place. Its feelings are I wouldn't submit to it. I don't trust the romantic instinct because I think the romantic instinct is one of these things. It's just waiting to be kind of plugged into the Ouroboros brain and be like recircled back in on itself, like the Studio Ghibli animation. Studio Ghibli itself being an example of romanticism. Like Studio Ghibli movies are romantic movies. But I think the core insight of romanticism is that like ideas drive the world or ideals drive the world. I feel like romanticism is sort of the artistic expression of what the German idealists were trying to formalize. That is completely crackpot philosophy. So don't take that to the bank. That's just my very informal, very unreliable male intuition telling me that there's an intimate connection there. But I think like romanticism is best understood as a rejection of materialism. So if you say like vox populi, vox dei, like that's what democracy means, right? But it only makes sense if you actually believe in a day. Like the voice of the people is the voice of God, only insofar as you believe in God. And like, the voice that emanates from the tent of the people, or like the congregation of the people, has been influenced by the Holy Spirit. And like I kind of understand that, but modern Democrats don't buy that. And modern Democrats are like, oh no, I every time I'm in a conversation with Matt McManus or any of these liberals, I say like, oh, you believe in democracy, so you believe in vox populi and vox dei. And they're like, no, 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 no. Of course I don't believe in vox populi and vox dei. Uh, and I don't think that's correct. I think that if you're a Democrat, the correct response is, well, of course, vox populi is not vox dei in all circumstances. But when the people speak, we are perceiving the movements of God as if through a glass darkly, as if through a veil, such that the guardians can excise certain missteps that the people make. And then we are perceiving like an esoteric experience through the people as a medium collectively. That is the genuine emotion behind democracy when all the modernist bullshit from the Enlightenment is bled out. That is the core emotional motivation for democracy. And so I think you're on the right track there. Aspiring misanthrope for $5 says, "A white pill for you, Dave. My fiance and I are getting married soon. Oh, thank God be praised. Traditional Latin rite. We both want to have many, many babies. Nothing great to say. Easy to earn. Also, John Slaughter publishes essays in book form. Do you do the same? I am trying to get a book project together. I just haven't started on it. I need to get my life in order first. As soon as I finish moving, I will begin on the book project. I promise. I actually do mean it this time. But I need to finish this. I need to get my writing situation under control. Aspiring misanthrope for $3 USA. Regarding the state of discourse, maybe all those German Wehrmacht memes saying there was never a political solution to our troubles weren't so tongue in cheek. I have no idea. Oh my God. I have family members that were in the Wehrmacht, and I have never heard this phrase. There was never a political solution to our troubles. Uh, oh, you mean like war? I mean, I guess so. I mean, I don't think that. I mean, in some sense, politics is going to get to be like war, but I don't think that you could fight a war against progressives. I don't think that will even make any sense. Luke Bracksher for $3 says, "Hey Dave, back in 2021, when you debated Adam and Sitch, you mentioned 18 points of decline since the 1960s. Could you post that full list at some point? I think it'd be very helpful." Uh, well, yeah, I have the list on the video, so it's there. You can pause the video. I don't know if I have it written out, and the problem also is that some of those trends are like recent. So, for instance, the decline in family was started in the 60s. The decline in childbearing started in the 19th century. The decline of like genetic stock, at least if you believe like the Edward Dutton stuff, that started in the 18th century, or the early 19th century, and the rise in suicide rates started in the 2000s, and the rise in depression started in the 90s, and then crime rates, went down in the early 20th century, way up in the 60s, and then down in the 90s, and then way up in the 2020s. So, I mean, the problem with the list of trends is that although I think they all indicate the problems with the same set of liberal ideas, I wouldn't recommend like busting them out in a debate because like they're not traced across the same time period. And if you bring them against someone like Destiny, they will chew holes in them for just that reason. That will be the counterattack vector. But in a calm conversation, I would make the case that these are all symptoms of the same set of modernist ideas. Dark Voyager for $5. Very appropriate since I mentioned Voyager. Thank you very much. Creeper Weirdo for $3. Thank you very much. Dave, you reminded me that I need to read Nausicaa and the Valley of the Wind manga. Look it up. The creator was making it during and after the movie. I heard it's very dark and very good. Yes, I read that in high school. I would be lying if I said I liked it. No, look, definitely read it. I'm telling you to read that one. I have a hard time imagining that it's not inspired by Gene Wolfe and other dying world type fiction. I love dying world. I love dying world fantasy. And Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind is dying world fantasy. And Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind is also Miyazaki. And Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind has great characters. And Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, the manga, has great scenes in it from the first volume to the fifth volume. And it's got an okay message, albeit a little bit poisoned with environmentalism. It feels like Princess Mononoke. And it's also way better than the anime, which, is an okay anime. It's one of Miyazaki's earliest ones. So why do I not like it? It is very long and very confused and very unfocused. It does not, it's not sharp. It feels like the author had no discipline and just threw all these ideas in a big pot and then decided to have like a Deus Ex Machina come in at the end and sort them all out. That's not a spoiler alert. All Miyazaki endings end with kind of a Deus Ex Machina, so you were expecting it. If you're looking for inspiration for a dying world novel that you're working on, or a dying world role-playing game that you're working on, and you're an artist, absolutely pick up that book and farm it for ideas. It was not a very enjoyable experience reading it as a novel consumer. I want my novels to be more like going somewhere, right? Not just like churn and churn and churn and churn and churn and churn. I hate that, especially from graphic novels. And I feel Japanese graphic novels are particularly bad at that. Akira had the same problem. I actually like the anime more because it was more like fresh. It was more boom. There you go. Alex Wegner for $3 says, "Hi, Dave. I want to be entertained, enclosed in fantasy, comfort, and pleasure. I hate fear, reality, friction, duty. I feel that voice whisper in the back of my mind. Tips to resist it? Yeah, get obligations. Get obligations. Like, force yourself to get outside. I don't think that this voice is resistible online, but just like get a schedule and stick to it. Absolutely. Like, spouses and children are amazing for that. Do not let yourself have free time in front of the internet that is not constrained by a time. Never use internet last thing in the day. Like, that's the first step. Like, internet always has to be terminated at some point because you have an obligation. So never make internet as the last thing in your day, even if you need wind down time. Use the wind down time for reading novels or reading manga or painting miniatures. That's an addictive hobby. But painting miniatures, it doesn't suck you. I mean, I guess it is kind of a pleasure hole of its own variety, but it's not online, and so it's better. Make every activity you have that's pleasurable be self-terminating with a time limit. Lee Grognard for $3 says, "Do you remember the Michigan Review from your time in Ann Arbor? We lost the battle to the Longhouse when I was editor there. The editor-in-chief while I was there is a New York Times contributor now." I was a shitlib when I was in Michigan, so I probably never read the Michigan Review. I'm really sorry. It probably was the only time in my life when I wouldn't have jumped at the opportunity to read conservative thought, because I was a libertarian before I was a shit lib, and I was a conservative briefly afterwards before I became a reject the modern world person as I am right now. I don't know. I go blue, right? Michigan's still my football team, though. College football is just like, that is just what football should be. NFL is just, I don't like the NFL, other than the Blood Bowl jokes, and the theme song. I love the NFL theme song, but I'm sorry to hear that the editor in chief, man, there's a story there, isn't there? Ann Arbor is a lovely place, and it's got a lot of history behind it. It was a communist hotbed too. I would love to hear that story if I meet you in real life sometime. I would really want to hear that story, actually. But thanks for the super chat. Creeper Weirdo for $5 USA. I saw some feminists trying to clap back at some anti-feminist spreading a picture of a pregnancy suit concept. See, she said, "This is good for women, actually." My exact words were, "How can you hate society so much that you don't see how disgusting this is?" Yeah, I mean, I don't even know. I mean, this is like, the problem here is that feminism will always win in the marketplace of ideas, at least in female circles. So, these female circles, these female group chats, female group chats. What I mean is any social media that is dominated by women, feminist thoughts will always rise to the surface in terms of sharing and in terms of validation, and therefore in terms of what the algorithm rewards. So feminism is virtually indestructible, regardless of its incoherence. Women really come into themselves in reality individually. Women are great political thinkers as long as they can be separated from, like, the collective. They have insights that men could never have. So there's that. But I've given up trying to fight against feminism in women versus women fights, because feminism will always win. I'd like to reward conservative women, but I haven't found a way to do that hasn't resulted in variations of kind of longhouse style thinking coming back, even from conservative group chats. Owen Zaleski, not Zelensky. Sorry. I deserve that. Owen Zaleski says, "Hello, Dave. I hope you're having a fruitful Lent. Today was very disappointing for me, so say a prayer for me if you can. I have been working on an art group where I am and thinking of a mission statement for it. Any advice on writing one? GB. I don't know, mission statements for art groups. I just think that, like, state your values, state your artistic vision, and kind of go from that point onward, and then kind of commit to supporting people who share your vision. I have never written a mission statement for an art group, so I really don't know. I don't even know how art groups work. My roommate in college was a big artist, but I've never known artists in in the community. But thank you. I will try to think of one. I will keep you in my prayers. Penultimo for $5 USA says, "Sometime back with the dead internet theory, you proposed that at some point we may see a resurgence of Web 1.0 and a premium on knowing someone was involved in making what you consume. Do you still feel this way with today's state of slop?" Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Substack is an attempt to remake Internet 1.0, and Substack is at risk for getting killed by people who pay to play and people who game the algorithm, and essentially Notes. Notes is threatening to turn Substack into Twitter, and the mainstream cringe stack writers are threatening to turn Substack into Medium. Once you optimize the system, you're dead. And the best we can do is curate smaller places that share our values. And one of our values is that the thing being written is actually written by the person who claims to have written it and not by an LLM that's fed on other authors' input. That is absolutely essential. That is as essential as knowing that the fact is actually observed in real life and not an artifact that was just made up by an LLM that's trying to replicate reality. It's as essential to know that the documentary you're watching is actually based on real events and not on the figments of some person's imagination or not from the rumors of some group chat. Yes, that's very much so. Um, Doubting Thomas. Is Christian moral teachings incomplete? The New Testament barely emphasizes devotion to kin and instead focuses on love for self and non kin neighbors. Either Christ presumes Gentiles, it is continued, by instinct prioritize family, flawed assumption, or being raised in a Jewish tradition is necessary prerequisite for a fully ethical framework. So is Christianity fit for modern Gentiles? Yes. Uh, I mean, you have so Doubting Thomas, you have highlighted a dimension on which Christianity is getting hacked by its modern enemies. But we have to understand Christianity as it was intended by the apostles and by Christ. And during that time, the assumption that people would have rightly ordered loves when it came to kin was default. So, to understand Christ, we must have rightly ordered pre Christian loves, which we can learn from the Old Testament by superimposing the struggles of the tribe of David onto our own peoples, or by looking to our own natural or looking to our own pagan traditions expression of natural truth and natural religion and natural law. Those are necessary prerequisites for the Christian revelation. And whether you learn them from Aristotle or your pagan Eddas or Beowulf or the Torah or the Hebrew prophets or the Psalms, you have to learn them before you have the proper linguistic framework for understanding the words of Christ. Christ requires a proper linguistic framework of value that is brought about by proper ordering of loves in the pre-Christian Hebrew form or the pre-Christian pagan form. And that is why Christ's message required a fullness of time, or one of the reasons why Christ's incarnation required the fullness of time before it was even possible. And so this is like every system is hackable. And you, Doubting Thomas, have identified one mechanism for its hacking. But the way to confront this is to be aware of it and to step around it, not to toss the baby out with the bathwater. Your heterosexuality is hackable via porn. Do you therefore discard your heterosexuality? Your feeling of camaraderie is hackable by by social media. Do you therefore throw out your love of camaraderie? Your love of Miyazaki is hackable by the fact that it can be replicated by an LLM. But because something can be hacked or counterfeited, does not destroy the validity of that original thing. You have to believe that. You have to believe that there's real value out there, or you're not going to make it in this age where everything can be counterfeited. And like that is something that we have to learn in this age. Sam153 says, "Happy April Fool's Day, Dave. All the best jokes to you." Yeah, I did not have an April Fool's joke today, but I figured that the title itself, the reference to Red Hot Chili Peppers, was joke enough. So thank you very much. Sam153 again says, "Also check out Red Ensign's new article by Kryptos, Canada's New Political Reality, a Canuck must read." Absolutely, that was... I love Red Ensign. I love Kryptos. I love Black Horse's work, one of the best. And, you know, it's gotten to the point where there's just so much stuff I can't promote it enough. There's not enough hours in the day. The most I can do is respond and try to contribute to it. The space has just gotten too big, and that's a good thing, right? I guess, I had to share the profits a little bit, but at the same time, this means we're ready to expand. We're ready to move to a normie audience. No Lee Noel. Noel says, for $3, have you ever read Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann? I got it recommended in a book I read by Father Seraphin Rose. It's amazing. I think you like it. Okay, I was avoiding that book because I heard bad things about it. Now I definitely need to read it. Uh, I've known of that book forever and I never read it. But thank you so much for recommending it to me. I will, I will definitely read it now that you recommended it. But I was avoiding it because I thought it was. I had reservations. Chai is squared for $15 USA. I enjoy making video games as a hobby and have for most of my life, but it seems like video games have a tendency to sink time without enriching the people who play. How do I keep this hobby and reconcile this? Is it even possible? Yeah, of course it is. Everything is possible. Everything can be redeemed. Even LLMs can be redeemed. Although that's very hard because they're like deception engines and they're like counterfeit engines. Um, so they're literally like dark mirrors. If you do things with enough love and with rightfully ordered loves, everything could be redeemed. I mean, I should really write an article on this. Can video games be redeemed? Can illusion be redeemed? I think that when people objectively look at the video games that really gave their life meaning, people will remember more fondly the more primitive the video game is and the more clearly it sticks to its own idea of itself. Uh, the I'm more of a board gamer than a video gamer, and I'm always have my eye out for the board games that really know what they are and walk into it. So if you want to do a platformer, do a platformer. Uh, I really like the indie platformers of the early 2010s. I I hated what they became, but like Kentucky Route 9 or whatever was a great idea for a game. And one of my favorite games of all time was Limbo. And Limbo was like again a dying world platformer with callbacks to Dante's Divine Comedy. And it was this great little experience. And I still like I loved Final Fantasy Tactics. Like to this day, that like people ask me, what is your favorite anime? I People know that I don't generally like anime, but I had an anime phase at one point, and I hate to say it, but my favorite anime that stuck with me the most is Final Fantasy Tactics, and it's a video game. It's an anime video game. I love the plot. I love the music. I love the gameplay. Like it's possible to do this stuff, but it's just I think it's very hard to create an immersive sandbox game but it's possible. People have done it. People have done it. Like, BioShock is a master. I guess it's not a sandbox game. I am the wrong person to ask about artistic sandbox games, but I've heard it's been done. So everything can be redeemed as long as it says what it is. People need to know what is the experience of this thing. Not like I'm going to dedicate my life to this thing. Not like I'm going to make an idol of this thing. Not I'm going to organize my life as this thing. But like, what is the proper way to experience this thing that is Mario or Tetris or Final Fantasy Tactics or whatever, right? Like that is what it needs to have before it can be redeemed. Um, I will read the last Entropy Super Chat and then we will do the Psalm. Luke Brasher for $3 says, given that you're a Catholic, how important is the Pope actually? He seems like a semi-divine figure in the faith, but many conservative Catholics seem to act like this blatant heresy does not matter. I mean, the Pope is the inheritor of Saint Peter and the steward of Christ, nothing more. He is the bishop. He is the patristic, the patriarchal handmaid. I guess literally patristic, but he is the patristic patriarch, the church, the leader of the church that Christ built. He is still a man. He is not divine. He does not have a divine personality, but via Christ's words, we are led to believe that his pronouncements as an actor of the church will be guided properly in prayer and in communion with Christ's intentions. Or there will be a pope that will have that proper guidance, that will embody the correct lineage of Christ's church. Christ did not write a book, he founded a church. That church was built on the foundation of the gospel and the teachings of St. Paul, but it was founded first and foremost as a patristic tradition, as a Marian tradition, and there is a hint of divinity through the workings of the Holy Spirit, but it is not a person. It is not a divine person that exists in the Pope. So I get, is that, if that distinction isn't good enough for you, then I can't really help you. It seems clear enough for most people. I mean, if St. Peter were living today, if he just didn't die, if he was not crucified on Vatican Hill, as the tradition tells us, and he just lived for 2,000 years, and he were to walk into your house, how would you regard him? Not as a divine being, but probably you would regard him with a certain amount of respect. And I think the Pope is a similar example of that. Albeit it's hard because I literally consider St. Peter a saint, and because, and there really can't be living saints outside of the Virgin Mary. That's a limitation on the analogy, but that's as best I can do. Anyway, guys, thank you for joining me for this stream. Thank you for your super chats, and I will be live again. A lot of people watch this stream. I'll definitely say that. Thank you for joining me and for patronizing the stream. It really helps out my channel a lot. As always, the audio versions will be available on my Substack at Fiddler's Green for paying subscribers, where you can support my essay work there. In the meantime, like, share, and subscribe. And thank you for tuning in. Here is the Psalm, Psalm 7. Lord my God, I take refuge in you. Save and deliver me from all who pursue me, or they will tear me apart like a lion and rip me to pieces with no one to rescue me. Lord my God, if I have done this and there is guilt on my hands, if I have repaid my ally with evil, or without cause have robbed my foe, then let my enemy pursue and overtake me. Let him trample my life to the ground and make me sleep in the dust. Arise, Lord, in your anger. Rise up against the rage of my enemies. Awake, my God, decree justice. Let the assembled people gather around you, while you sit enthroned over them on high. Let the Lord judge the peoples. Vindicate me, Lord, according to my righteousness, according to my integrity. O Most High, bring to an end the violence of the wicked, and make the righteous secure. You, the righteous God, who probes minds and hearts. My shield is God Most High, who saves the upright in heart. God is a righteous judge, a God who displays his wrath every day. He does not relent. He will sharpen his sword. He will bend the string of his bow. He has prepared his deadly weapons. He makes ready his flaming arrows. Whoever is pregnant with evil conceives trouble and gives birth to disillusionment. Whoever digs a hole and scoops it out falls into the pit that they have made. The violence comes down on their own heads. I will give thanks to the Lord because of his righteousness. I will sing his praises of the name of the Lord Most High. Do not fall into the pits that you yourself have dug. The psalm reflects the sentiment. At any rate, guys, thank you so much for joining me on this evening. And I hope to see you next week. Have a blessed rest of the evening and a good